This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning indeed to you. Keir Starmer unveiling his manifesto later this morning. And as we did with Rishi Sunak, we will take that live and probably take the questions afterwards. I know what you're thinking. People have been wondering for some time now what the pothole would look like that could derail. I've mixed my metaphors there. Can a pothole derail an engine? You can't. I don't think it can. But what would the obstacle look like that might derail this Labour campaign? And I think we know now, don't we? Let me see if you can work it out before I say it out loud. Remember, you can text the programme using the numbers 84850, or in this wonderful 21st century studio, you can WhatsApp me using the same numbers that you used to ring in. 03456060973. Can you think what might actually, the thing that could undo Keir Starmer's increasingly inevitable looking march to number 10 Downing Street? I'll give you a clue. It could happen at 12 o'clock today. Do you need another clue? It's Thursday. What could it be that could derail? Yes, there is a chance that he may interfere with Mystery Hour. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know. I will have to wait and see what happens. Ian is taking it all a bit too seriously. Voter apathy, he writes. I'm quite right too, Ian. We should be looking at the grown-up answers to this question. It's fair to say unlikely. Unlikely. And Sean's cross, he says, you won't read out the WhatsApp messages, though. You see, I've just done some philosophy on you there, Sean. If I read out a message saying that I won't read out the message, what happens there? Philosophically speaking, we move into a sort of space-time vortex, I think. Is the answer Nadine Dorries, says Ben in Stafford. If the answer is Nadine Dorries, Ben in Stafford, then I am almost certainly asking the wrong question. No, the answer is interfering with Mystery Hour, but we've passed that now. 5 minutes after 10 is the time. So we'll begin with Rishi Sunak, and sometimes I say things to you, and I forget that I have the right to change my mind in one sense, but in another sense, I don't. So I could say something to you now, and especially if it it'll end up on YouTube, won't it? Anyway, regardless of whether or not it's clipped up for a tilt at virality, I could say something to you now, and 5 years from now, I may hold a completely different opinion. There is, as we've often observed on this programme, no point having a mind if you never change it. And the problem with my life on air, the problem with my professional life, is that I can say something in the moment, and in this video age, it can be almost like preserved in amber for the ages. And 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you could send that clip to me on social media and quite rightly accuse me of all manner of offences and hypocrisies, whereas, in fact, all I've done is very simply change my mind. Do you want to know the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me as a so-called broadcaster? It's probably the simple fact that when I started doing this, there weren't tilts at eternity. The programmes that I appeared on very, very early in my broadcasting career are not preserved for posterity. They're not all over YouTube. It was before YouTube existed, would you believe? Almost. Because I used to argue positions that I didn't believe in. I was supposed to. I was on a debating programme, and it wasn't that I was lying, it was that I was engaging in the art of debating. But goodness me, those things could come back to haunt me like you wouldn't believe if people were so minded. And of course, in this modern era of mischief and fake news, people are so minded. So I'm going to say something now which will probably come back to haunt me. I'm beginning... no, that's not quite right. I am in danger of beginning to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. Let me just get those words exactly clear. I am in danger of beginning to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. The reasons for this are many, actually. Even on the D-Day stuff, egregious misjudgment though it was, it didn't merit some of the nastier criticism from the sort of far-right extremities of public discourse in this country, which sought to accuse him of a lack of patriotism or even bringing his ethnicity into the question of whether or not he understands our history. I'm just such a pant-wettingly unpleasant and stupid accusation that even though you hold the victim of the accusation in very low regard, you perhaps begin to feel sorry for. This hasn't gone down well. No, James, no, writes Seema. Give your head a wobble, James, says Jane. And Sunak looked so uncomfortable last night. There's no spreadsheet macro for empathy, says Mike. So this may be a lonely furrow that I plough this morning, but I'm not currently feeling sorry for him. I've just noted, because I am a empathetic human being, unlike Rishi Sunak, I've noted that I am in danger of beginning to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. The Sky TV comment yesterday, which we quite rightly picked apart with a fine-tooth comb, it was incredibly tin-eared. It was indicative of an actual inability to relate to people markedly different from himself. But again, nobody's born like that. It is a result of conditioning. And he's ended up being supremely ill-equipped for the job that he currently has. Supremely ill-equipped to be a campaigning Prime Minister after 14 years of Tory rule. And there's reason number 3 to be in danger of beginning to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. How much of the misery he is currently enduring is a consequence of his own conduct, and how much is him effectively reaping what was sown by David Cameron, by Boris Johnson, by Liz Truss, and to a lesser extent by Theresa May? And how much of Rishi Sunak's campaign is an exercise in can-carrying for his predecessors? And then, of course, you feel sorry for him because he's lumbered with some of the personnel consequences of that period. Andrea Jenkins, the woman best known, I think, for flipping the bird at the great British public on her way into Downing Street, now has pictures of Farage on her promotional literature, which is, you wouldn't wish that on your worst enemy, that level of obnoxious disloyalty to a party leader. Even when Jeremy Corbyn was held in extraordinarily low regard by his own MPs, they wouldn't campaign with a picture of a politician dedicated to their destruction on their campaign literature. So you start almost feeling sorry. Think of it. I'm going to turn this oil tanker around if it kills me. All right. So you can carry on sending me your snarky comments and your cynical responses, but I am coming back. Boxing. Right? Boxing. What do you have to be made of to relish and enjoy the bits of a boxing fight? It doesn't happen so much anymore because the referee tends to intervene. But if you were to go back in history, the moment where the fight is clearly won, it's over, but the loser is still standing, and the punches are still raining. He's propped up by the corner post or propped up by the ropes, and the opponent, the winner, the victor, is still raining punches on him, and the fella's head's gone, his eyes are rolling in his head, and they're just punching and punching. Now, even if you hate the losing fighter, even if you have put your life savings on the winning fighter, even if you have dedicated your entire boxing watching life to despising the character now getting absolutely destroyed in the ring, what do you have to be made of to relish that, to actually enjoy the sight of somebody suffering in public on an extraordinary scale? Do you see what I mean now? Can you possibly see yourself as being in danger of beginning to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak? Jonathan doesn't. He writes, it depends. Did the loser lie to us and help to destroy our country? ? Capital letters, keep punching. So what I'd like to try, if indeed I can, is to confine calls in the first instance to people who voted Conservative in 2019 and or 2017, all right? 2017 is an interesting example because when Theresa May called that election, she did so because all of the polling showed that she was enjoying quite a healthy lead. In every demographic, would you believe? She was actually ahead of Jeremy Corbyn. By the time the election day came, of course, things were considerably closer than anybody had really foreseen, and Theresa May ended up coming out of that election even weaker than she went into it, on the advice of someone called Nick Timothy, who almost inevitably has been rewarded for his exceptional incompetence by becoming a regular columnist in the Daily Telegraph. I think he might even be fighting a seat for the Tories. That's part of the problem. That's another reason to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. All of the people responsible for turning the Conservative Party into a clown car have been promoted and rewarded by both the party machine and the right-wing media. So what I'd like to do is confine early calls to people who voted Conservative in 2017 and 2019 and ask you what you think has gone so wrong. There's two questions here. What's gone so wrong for Rishi Sunak and how much of it is his fault? So Tory voters from the last two general elections, I just in the first instance, I'm more interested in your a perspective on this. Nigel writes, no, not that one. Did you forget your medication this morning, James? Chris writes, absolutely not, James. The guy is richer than the king. Neil says, feel sorry for Rishi? Absolutely not. The quicker and the harder that he and the Conservatives at large are taken out, the better. That's from Neil in Wigan. I can think of 650 million reasons why I feel no sympathy for Rishi Sunak. Well, I'd take you back, Del, to my boxing analogy. The boxer getting pummeled may be picking up a £50 million purse for that fight, but there comes a point when watching somebody be pummeled appeals to your basic humanity, and you want it to stop. It may need a bit more work, this analogy, or certainly this furrow. But we'll begin ploughing it by asking this twin question. If you voted Conservative in 2017 or 2019, why do you think it has all gone so wrong? 0345 6060 973. And how much of what we are seeing, how many of the punches being landed on Rishi Sunak are Rishi Sunak's fault, as opposed to consequences of what has gone before, over a period of at least 14 years. Okay, hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I stress, I just said I was in danger of beginning to feel sorry for him. It doesn't mean that I am. We've got a texter in Kigali, would you believe, in Rwanda. Daryl writes, it's a bit like Kettering playing Manchester City in the third round of the FA Cup. 8-0 down at half-time, but you hope that Pep keeps piling the pressure on. You see, I wouldn't. Watching as a neutral, you'd sort of hope that there aren't as many goals in the second half as there were. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, of course you see what I mean. 10:16 is the time. Hit those numbers now. You will get through. And a little later in the hour, we may turn our attention to reasons why you shouldn't feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. So keep your powder dry for that one.
James O'Brien on LBC.
19 minutes after 10. Mixed bag this morning. Some of you know exactly where I'm coming from. Some of you think I've completely lost the plot. Bob writes, are you starting to show compassion for the con men, James? But John in Leeds writes, I hate his politics, but I worry for the man. He looks close to mental exhaustion. As a caring, woke snowflake, you can't help empathy kicking in. And I know exactly what you mean by that. Although Anthony writes, two words, James, Suella Braverman. He had an opportunity to turn the tide and move the party back towards the centre ground, and he didn't take it. I don't feel sorry for him. Please put the boot in. And Karen in Lewis takes it a little further psychologically and writes, he's a tragic figure. I don't think he had enough play as a child. Well, that counts as sympathy, doesn't it? Not just empathy. Scott's in York. Scott, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. First of all, I'd like to just say I hope I can try and help you move away from the brink of feeling sorry for our Prime Minister, because I've been of a similar opinion over the past few days, James. I don't think any of our politicians, Prime Minister, or any of us should have to suffer what these people are literally being put through, but I don't think we should feel sorry for them, because, I mean, I was reading your book, I had no idea in Mr. Sunak's banking passed and the involvement in bringing down our banking system that we're all still suffering from. And this has got nothing to do with COVID. It's got nothing to do with Brexit. This was all before then. And
so you're suggesting that in order to stop myself from starting to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak, I should read my own book?
I think you should just maybe go back and read the first couple of chapters, because I was absolutely gobsmacked when I read it, James. But on top of that, I mean, like I say, I don't think anyone should be having to suffer what these guys are going through, and I do feel sorry for the man himself. But this is the man that came to politics. He wasn't voted by us, even though he keeps saying if he gets voted back in, we didn't vote for him in the first place. That should be made clear sometimes, that we often forget that. But he was going to clean up politics. He had an opportunity to clean up politics, to come in, be honest with us. If things are going to be difficult, tell us it's going to be difficult, but do as he's going to say. And he hasn't done that. And I think this is the biggest falling of him. It's the fact that he hasn't stood by his word, and we can't trust him.
Oh, this is a really interesting answer, actually, because you've sort of opened up a third way, haven't you? Because I've gone, how much is his fault and how much is the fault of what went before? But in a way, you're saying that his failure to actually move away from what went before is a reason to pin it on him rather than the people who came before.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, but what came before, some people were happy with it. I certainly wasn't. Some people will always stand up for Boris, but this was a clean sheet opportunity, and he's blown it as far as I'm concerned. And he could have done it.
That's interesting.
If he was strong enough to do it. And I do feel sorry for the guy in a way that he hasn't done that. But at the same time, these leaders, they go through the education system and the same with Cameron, again, going back to your book. It was his God-given right that he thought one day he should be Prime Minister, whether he's capable of doing the job or not. And the same with Rishi. Maybe he was never destined to be Prime Minister, but these people think they can do it, and they don't stand up for what's right for the people. It's what they think in their minds they're destined to do, or they want to be able to do,
and that becomes
the job.
Yeah, no, that you're right. That's a symptom of our class system, I think, and you don't see that, I don't think, from Keir Starmer, that sense of entitlement almost, or I mean, Cameron's answer to the question of why do you want to be Prime Minister was actually, as Scott reminds us, he actually said, well, I think I'd be rather good at it. It's as if you've lived a life of such unquestioned privilege an advantage that you look at all the avenues available to you and you think Prime Minister is a perfectly plausible one. You have to go to a school like Cameron's to come up with an answer like that. Not with an ambition to be Prime Minister. That could take seed anywhere. But to just think, well, I think I'd be quite good at it. So, I mean, Scott, you sounded quite sympathetic, even as you insisted that you didn't feel sorry for him at all. But your analysis, I think, is going to take some beating. 23 minutes after 10 is the time. If you voted Tory in 2017 or 2019, the question is, what do you think? Why has it all gone so wrong? So wrong. To the point where Grant Shapps now is essentially, I think, trying to scare people into voting Tory in order to minimise the size of the Labour majority. That's disloyal in a way. That isn't somebody campaigning to win. That's somebody campaigning to cut their losses. And then, of course, the question of how much of this is on Rishi Sunak and how much of his current plight is, if you like, thrust upon him rather than a consequence of his own actions. Peter's in Burniston. Peter, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, mate.
I was at Rishi's selection meeting because I'm a member of that association, that Conservative association.
What, up in Richmond?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Richmond, Yorkshire.
Yes, no, I know.
Yeah. The thing was, he was absolutely astonishingly good. Speaking from the heart, just won the crowd over, and in a packed room, because Richmond Yorks is a very big Conservative association. In a packed room, he won on the first vote, which is almost, it's unusual, let's put it that way. And
yes.
Beat a strong local candidate as well, who had previously been chairman of the association.
Gosh, I didn't know that. I didn't. So he played an absolute blinder in front of the selection committee.
And he was a Brexiteer at that stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I disagreed with him then, disagreed with him now, in terms of that. And after he became an MP in 2015, and I spoke to him and I said, it's going to take at least 8 years to unravel out of the EU. And he said, I don't think it'll take that long. The circumstances of the Conservative Party have been such that I really do not think anybody can manage that organisation at the minute.
From the 2019 victory onwards?
From
or the cull, the 2019 cull of MPs.
Earlier than that.
Where would you go back to?
That.
You'd go back to Brexit.
2017.
Right.
2017. Because you have the people who are, and a lot of this has to do with Brexit. I know we don't speak about it enough, but a lot of it has to do with that. There are those people who are, it is said, to the right of the party, who are absolute zealots about that direction of travel, and worryingly so. And they undermined any attempt by Theresa May to get a sensible exit from the EU.
So it was letting people like Mark Francois and Brexit hardman Steve Baker anywhere near the steering wheel meant that the vehicle ended up in a place where, under your analysis, nobody would have been able to safely navigate it out of.
Well, nobody. They didn't have a coherent plan between however many of them there were.
No. And
because the parliamentary majority was only cobbled together with the help of the DUP, you couldn't get anything through, that was sensible now.
And everyone was pretending that things were going brilliantly and that the brave new world was just over the horizon and that unicorns were going to be delivered in time for tea. So that brings us up to him becoming leader. Yeah. So then,
Boris Johnson becomes leader.
Yes.
2019, majority of 80. Yeah.
I'm going to have to hurry you just because of the news. So let's hop that bit. We all know what happened under Johnson. How much of the disastrous campaign is personally down to Rishi Sunak? Because you've got the D-Day comments, you've got the Sky TV comments, you've got the taking his own party by surprise by calling the election. So I don't think, Peter, you can let him off the hook entirely, can you?
I'm not trying to let him off the hook. That everybody should share this responsibility.
Right.
Possibly people trying to put themselves forward Rishi putting himself forward for a leadership position that he wasn't ready for, didn't have the experience for, and when my wife and I were talking about this, you contrast his performance at the selection meeting with his performance in the debates when he is constrained by the tram lines of lines to take and landmines to avoid treading on. Yeah, he is so hidebound by that. I think he really struggles, and also he's got the weight of the country on his shoulders at a very difficult time.
Okay.
It doesn't help that sometimes his reactions, and a couple of days ago, the Sky TV is a latest iteration. Sometimes his actions don't resonate with people because his experience is so different.
And so, I hear you. I like this. It's generous, very generous. Just to be clear, that's a crow in the background, isn't it? Not a parrot.
That is the Yorkshire Dales in the background, sir.
We love that, don't we? Look at that. Jealous.
Sun is shining.
Well, I
can't
believe you're letting me spoil your view, Peter, on such a lovely morning. But I'm very grateful that you did. So I like that. And I welcome a general. I know, listen, so Olive makes this point very powerfully. I have no sympathy for Sunak. I'll save my sympathy for refugees in fear of being sent to Rwanda, or welfare claimants, or the disabled in fear of losing much needed money. The list goes on. I accept that. But I can hold two thoughts in my head at the same time. I can despise some of what a politician stands for, but at some point your humanity can kick in as well. And you don't even want people to throw projectiles at Nigel Farage, who is, repellent in so many ways. And yet, of course, you don't want to be somebody who ends up being in favour of violence being directed at politicians. Your humanity kicks in. And for Sunak, it hasn't really happened yet for me, but Peter's humanity was on full display there, and I thought it was quite a nice thing to see. 10:30 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:33 is the time. Peter Gagan with me in the next next part of the programme, having a look at the relationship between, in fact, the first caller alluding to my book, How They Broke Britain. It looks, Peter's gone a lot deeper than I do into the relationship between Tory donors and that bizarre collection of absurdly influential organisations centred around Tufton Street in central London. Peter will join us in about 15 or so minutes' time for his latest dispatches from that front line, largely ignored by the rest of the UK media for reasons that are pretty obvious, given that the rest of the UK media is largely infiltrated by precisely the organisations that I am referring to. You are correct, James, writes Colette in Enfield, to feel sorry for Sunak. It feels like I am watching a human being being abused, and yet the alternative to that position is that it is all on him, as no hostages rights. Nobody forced him to back Brexit. Nobody had a gun to his head when he served under and defended Johnson. Eat Out to Help Out was his idea. Emma reminds us in another message that Eat Out to Help Out was responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, of extra COVID deaths. He volunteered, continues No Hostages, to lead a party of Gullises, Trusses, Baddenocks, Longies and Cateses. What was the far right of the Tory party is now the centre. He knew that. He took responsibility for that party, and now he's asking you to vote for it. The perpetrator doesn't deserve our sympathy. His victims do. That, I suppose, is what me giving my head a wobble would sound like. And of course, Farage talking to Nick Ferrari this morning about leading a centre-right party in the event of some sort of reform Tory merger suggests that the depiction of the party having moved so far to the right that the far right is now the centre. That rather endorses that position, doesn't it? It kind of rather proves the point. 10:35 is the time. So looking at why Tory voters think it's gone so badly wrong, but for the rest of us now, we can look at this question of feeling sorry for Rishi Sunak and whether or not that might actually begin to affect the polls, whether that might begin to turn some of the tides massing against him. Jake's in Birmingham. Jake, what would you like to say?
I'm quite a young voter. Morning, by the way, sorry. Quite a young voter. So in 2019, I voted Tory, and I think that's very much to do with my upbringing. Yeah. Since then, bought a house, had kids.
Crikey, you've been busy.
Yeah. And it's since then that my political views have changed. I just don't see how anyone can be sympathetic for someone with as much money and so far away from reality that Rishi Sunak is.
So, whatever he did... Whatever, it sounded like a Take That song now. Whatever, he didn't mean it. Whatever he did or whatever he said, the sheer size of his bank balance, the more immersed you've become in the reality of economics, the sheer size of his bank balance means that you can't give him the time of day.
Pretty much, yeah. I just...
when did that happen? When did you notice that that's where you'd ended up?
Probably 12 months or so ago, and when my mortgage doubled.
Yeah. Well, that was on Liz Truss. I mean, among other things, but it was largely on Liz Truss, and Sunak was the one to be. Oh, mate, you've put me in a position now where I'm going to start defending him. During that leadership battle, he said that Liz Truss's policies would cause precisely the calamity that you've just described.
Which is fair enough, but he still represents that same party.
Yeah, you're right. You know, they try and disown it or separate from it, but that's the bottom line, isn't it? It's the same organisation.
You can disagree with it or you can argue against it, but ultimately the state of the UK economy and the current state we're in is because of the Tories. Doesn't matter the face that was behind it.
Mm. Is there any part of you that feels sorry for him? I don't know how much attention you're paying to the election campaign, but it's hard to imagine it going any worse than it has so far for him. Does it excite any feelings of sort of humanity, any human sympathy there for him?
Not really. He hasn't quite had it bad as bad as Farage. He hasn't had a milkshake thrown over him yet, has he? So I get that he's having it bad in the media and he's made some mistakes with D-Day and everything else, but I think you reap what you sow, don't you? It's just coming back on it.
Yeah, you do. And all, well, I guess that's the point of my question, is that he's reaping what other people sowed, as you've proved with your reference back to Liz Truss's economics. So don't tell me what constituency you're in or anything like that, but just tell me where you're likely to lean this time.
This time is definitely towards Labour.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, you're far from alone. That 2019 to 2024 journey has seen an awful lot of people review their options, shall we say. But the question of why it's all gone so wrong for Sunak does perhaps include when he missteps, then the size of his bank balance moves into play. It doesn't need to be there from the start. It doesn't need to be there immediately. It's kind of hard to get past in some ways, but it doesn't have to be front and centre until he does something that makes you think, well, that's got to be because he's just got absolutely no idea what it's like to run out of money before you run out of month. And people on quite high incomes can know what it's like to run out of money before you run out of month, but not people with hundreds of millions of pounds in the bank. We're staying in the Midlands. Roger's in Burton-on-Trent, over to the Potteries. Roger, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. How are you?
Very well. What have you got for me?
I'm dangerously agreeing with you that I do beginning to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. Well, I say unfortunately, but that's...
But you voted Tory in 2019 and 2017.
I did,
so you're more likely to feel sympathy for the latest iteration of the party, the governments that you've helped to elect than perhaps other people are. What do you think? Why do you think it's gone so wrong for him? And then we'll get on to where your sympathy is coming from.
I think it's simply gone wrong for him because he's simply just he's just inherited a poison chalice from the previous governments, even going back to Theresa May's, really. So I think he was...
So what would I'm interested in your votes then, in 2017 and in 2019, because you poisoned the chalice, did you? Or, I mean, what do you mean by that?
I have to agree with you, James. I did poison the chalice because in 2017 I voted because the alternative was Jeremy Corbyn, and I was not a fan of his politics.
Sure.
And in 2019 I fell for Boris Johnson's life.
Oh, okay.
So yes, I did. I am a part of that, and
therefore, as a contributor to the legacy that Rishi Sunak inherited, you can actually feel sorry for him having to play the cards that he was dealt by previous events.
Yes.
What about him personally? I mean, how ill-equipped is he for the task in hand, do you think?
Oh, he's in way over his head.
He is,
essentially. He's a bit like you used an analogy at the beginning of like a boxer in a ring.
Yeah.
I think he's more like a kid who wants. I think he was more like. Now you got me conscious here, mate. Thanks.
Yeah, good.
I think he was more like the kid who wanted to be a part of the in crowd, the in gang.
Yes.
And he's worked his way to the top, and now he's found himself at the top, and he's just going, "Oh, whoa, this is."
And they've all turned on him as well. Of course, I need to correct something, don't I, Roger? Burton's not in the Potteries. I don't know where I saw Staffordshire on my screen, so I reached for the first word that popped into my mind. Burton's better known for beer than the Pottery. 10:41 is the time. That 2019-24 journey, which our last two callers have taken, is going to be fascinating for historians. And unfortunately, it doesn't admit particularly sophisticated analysis. As Roger just put it, people fell for Boris Johnson's lies in 2019. You can vote in a moment and then repent at leisure, and that is what's happening. But how much sympathy Rishi Sunak deserves because of what he inherited, that is something that perhaps admits a slightly more sophisticated analysis. Nick's in St Albans. Nick, what would you like to say?
I'm right there with you, James.
Well, I'm not. No, you're not. No. I'm in danger of beginning to feel sorry for him. I'm not feeling sorry for him.
Well, in that case, I'm a few steps ahead of you.
Why?
Because isn't it funny how Boris Johnson was able to spread all of the conservative things that were done prior to him winning the election, and Keir and Rishi Sunak can't. I really do feel sorry for him when he came out with the joke yesterday about eating sugar and things like that. I just wanted to go up there and give him a hug I really did.
Are you overburdened by the empathy gene, do you think, Nick? Are you, like the woke, we woke snowflakes sometimes can't turn off our kindness.
That's true. And again, I am disabled. I am aware of the cuts the Conservative Party are trying to and have made to disabled people's benefits.
Yes.
Right. Having said that, I can't sit there and listen to him trying to do right by his party and not feel for him like the ground is crumbling underneath him. But most importantly, if Labour win the election, which they are likely to do, they need to have a decent opposition to keep them in check. And that's really, really important.
I've heard this argument a lot, and I've nodded along to it as well, actually. And I think even Grant Shapps was probably making a similar one, where he started warning about a supermajority. But what's the difference between an 80-seat majority and a 200-seat majority in terms of keeping the government in check? I'm not sure there is one, Nick, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but then I don't think there will be another Prime Minister who will be as defunct as Boris Johnson.
That's the kindest word I've ever heard applied to Boris Johnson. Defunct as well as morally corrupt as Boris Johnson. But I don't know. We've probably may do that. Have a conversation about this, whether or not it's going to have an impact, whether or not the size of that majority is worrying for democracy. It reminds me, actually, perfectly of an unhinged headline, because that is the message now that the client media, the people responsible for encouraging the population to vote for Brexit, to vote for Boris Johnson, to support Liz Truss, the people who hailed her economic plan, her budget as a stroke of absolute genius, and the people who continue, albeit a little more quietly, to cheerlead for Rishi Sunak, the loudest, most powerful voices in the British media, almost unanimously backed Brexit, backed Boris Johnson, backed austerity, backed Liz Truss, and now backed Rishi Sunak. So what unhinged headline could they pull out of their pocket today? Well, I shall tell you.
Unhinged headline.
A Tory wipeout risks one-party socialist state. That's on the front of the Daily Mail. Now, I thought when Paul Dacre ceased to be editor of the Daily Mail, although he remains editor-in-chief, I thought that they had peaked on unhinged stroke deeply fascistic headlines, the enemies of the people, to describe an independent judiciary, the crush the saboteurs, to describe elected parliamentarians from the Conservative Party, which is quite hard to believe in retrospect. And then, of course, the attack upon academic freedom, our Remainer universities. You thought things had gone as mad, perhaps, in that era as they were ever going to go. Or then finally a true Tory budget when Liz Truss drove the country off a cliff. Farage described that, by the way, as the best budget of his lifetime, although I don't know whether interviewers are reminding him of that at the moment on his tour of the studios. But this is up there, isn't it? A Tory wipeout risks one-party socialist state. Whatever you do, don't read the article, because there's no earthly way that the body of the text would be able to justify such a ludicrously unhinged headline.
Unhinged headline.
10:47 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:50 is the time, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Peter Gagan from the Democracy for Sale newsletter joins me now. It's always exciting to have Peter in the studio, and it usually means that we're turning our attention towards Tufton Street, or the congregation of opaque entities that centre on that street in Westminster. Before we get into your latest work, a couple of requests for an idiot's guide to Tufton Street.
Of course. What is it? Well, essentially, Tufton Street is like a shorthand for a kind of constellation of what you could call right-wing campaign groups, pressure groups, self-described think tanks that are located. Some of them are in a building called 55 Tufton Street, which is a very nice street in central London. I have to say it's a very nice address. And some are next door in 57 Tufton Street. Some of them are in other streets, other locations in and around it. There are groups like the Institute of Economic Affairs, who we've discussed on this programme in the past. Groups like the Centre for Policy Studies. Some of these are groups that have existed for a very long time, very much on the right of British politics, were very influential actually during the years with Margaret Thatcher, had largely disappeared in some respects. Brexit reanimated a lot of them, and it's fair to say they were very, very much in the tank for Liz Truss, quite a lot of them. Really, really, the ideas behind Liz Truss, which frankly didn't go all so well. But one of the reasons I've been interested in so much is is they get a lot of access. You'll often hear these guys in the media. They sound like they're very independent. The Institute of Economic Affairs, for example, sounds very independent, sounds like the Institute of Fiscal Studies. But actually, these people don't declare their donors, they don't say where their money is, and they've got really, really strong links with the Conservative Party, which I think a lot of people in this country wouldn't know when they first encounter them.
They sometimes might be called a free market think tank, for example, which is a fairly cuddly term in some ways. And yet we talk a lot about the anonymity of the donors and the opaqueness of the funding, but the stories you are here to talk to us about involve the identities of donors.
Yeah, well,
there's two stories, isn't there? We've got the one that Rishi Sunak likes to present himself as very different from Liz Truss, is the first line of one of the stories, and the other looks at how many or how much identified Conservative donors have pumped into these so-called think tanks. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with today's one, which is all about how who's actually funding these think tanks, which is we were able to discover using documents, kind of a lot of trawling through returns, charitable returns, and some FOI work as well, to find out some of these people, because we don't know who they are. And it turns out, interestingly, these groups have actually had a lot of money, almost £7 million in the last 5 years, from Conservative donors. And this is a lot for these organisations. They have an annual turnover of £2.5-3 million, the biggest ones. This is a huge chunk of money. And what's fascinating, I think, about that is you have these are people who are big Tory donors, people like Michael Hinsa, Lord Michael Hinsa, a number of people in the House of Lords, four Lords. Lord Vincent gave the IEA an investment of almost £4 million. So this is big chunks of money. And what's fascinating about this is these are also people who donate to the Conservative Party. So at what point does the Conservative Party end and Tufton Street begin if both organisations are being bankrolled by the same people?
And it's interesting for a number of reasons, but not least because if I'm watching Question Time, I'll see representatives of these organisations as almost in the independent chair, because there'll be a Tory MP there and there'll be a Labour MP there, and then there'll be someone from quotes think tank, end quotes, on the end of the panel, whereas, as you're pointing out, they couldn't be more intertwined really with the Conservative Party. So I knew about the personnel. I know about people moving from Tufton Street into the Conservative Party high command with, almost like a revolving door. I think Sunak's current director of communications was involved in the IEA's last attempt to silence you and me, but we can all remember how well that went for them. But you're going beyond the personnel and you're looking at where the cash actually came from. £6.8 million of it. And it could be a coincidence. You could be both a Conservative donor and, for balance, giving all of this money to a Tufton Street operation. But it seems unlikely.
Well, what's interesting as well, James, is in the story that we did yesterday, we started looking at, well, who actually runs these Tufton Street organisations? So you've got the people you see and I see that go into the comms jobs. And if you look at this world like we do, we will see someone who one day is working for a Tufton Street outlet, then they go into government. They might even become an MP. They will have a conveyor belt. It's basically been a conveyor belt over the last 15 years. But what was really interesting as we started looking at, well, who runs these? Who are the actual trustees? Who are the directors? Who signs the documents? And if you look across the piece, it's a humongous amount of Tory donors. We found more than £35 million given from directors, trustees and advisors of Tufton Street organisations to the Tory party. Look at, say, the Centre for Policy Studies, which was set up by Keith Joseph, who was very much the architect of Margaret Thatcher. The chair of the board at the Centre for Policy Studies is Lord Michael Spencer, who's given more than £7 million to the Tories.
We should stress that it describes itself as independent and non-partisan. My late father would say it says Daz on the side of buses, but it doesn't mean they sell it inside.
Indeed. So what's interesting is you've got these big Tory donors, Anthony Bamford, all the rest of it. We worked out that they've given this £35 million to the Tory party. Some of these think tanks, actually, Centre for Policy Studies isn't one of them. They say they're independent and partisan. Other think tanks are actually charities where they actually have a duty to consult with all major political parties.
Educational charities.
And how much money have they given to other political parties? 65 grand to the Lib Dems and not a penny to Labour, these donors.
Diddly squat to the Labour Party. And you're looking at the way in which, in some ways, Sunak is being funded by precisely the same people that inspired Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget.
Well, this is really striking if you look at it. It surprised me because you have Sunak's language as Truss was wrong, I'm a new face. Once Rishi Sunak got into power, he made a new treasurer of the Tory party, which is often what you do when you want to raise money. Who did he make as a treasurer? A guy called Graham Edwards, who runs a water company, amongst other things. But he was also a donor to Liz Truss, gave £50,000 to Liz Truss's campaign, is on the board of the Centre for Policy Studies, so was very clearly behind Liz Truss. If you think Liz Truss was so bad, would you make one of her donors your new right-hand man? Graham Edwards has raised almost £50 million for the Tories. He's also given over £4 million to Sunak.
How much of that came from Frank Hester?
A huge chunk.
Almost all of it.
Yeah. Almost all of it. If you, between the
I misspoke there. From the racist businessman Frank Hester.
Between these directors that we're looking at and Frank Hester, you're talking about almost half of all the money the Tory party have taken in under Rishi Sunak.
It explains why they can't give it back, doesn't it? Really.
Well, they need
perhaps
it.
One of the reasons why they're not giving it back. The other might be that they're not as disgusted by his racist abuse of Diane Abbott as the rest of us are. And I mean, I've got to be honest with you, Peter. I always enjoy your work, but I wasn't expecting to come across a former Russian arms tycoon in your latest dispatch.
Well, that refers to a guy called Alexander Tamerko, who Reuters described as that in a story a couple of years ago, talking about how close he was to Boris Johnson. Alexander Tamerko is he's an advisor to the Institute for Economic Affairs. He's given over £1 million through both personally and through a company called Aquin to the Tory party. And again, he was someone who was very supportive of Liz Truss and is now bankrolling Rishi Sunak. Has given over almost £100,000 since Rishi Sunak became the Prime Minister. And I think it gives you some idea of these kind of how this small group, what we really are talking about here, James, is a small group of very wealthy people with, frankly, very specific political ideologies that very much benefit them financially. It's all, a lot of the time, about low tax, which benefits them, who are, as we've discovered, really bankrolling these influential Tufton Street outlets, bankrolling the Tories. And when you see these guys on TV, and as you say, they're on a political panel show, and you've got someone from the IEA next to somebody from the Conservative Party, at what point do you actually have to say, well, these are actually two sides of the same coin?
Since 2020, these think tanks have met government ministers more than 150 times, with the Centre for Policy Studies meeting ministers on 64 separate occasions, more than we think any other. Well, you think this is your work, which you've done in conjunction this time, haven't you, with the Mirror and the I keep calling them Drop the Dead Donkeys, but it's the Led by Donkeys pressure group organisation. It's a collaboration, and you're also looking at the frequency upon which they appear in the UK media, the Telegraph being Tufton Street's biggest booster, followed by the Murdoch-owned Times, and then the Mail. Of course, BBC and indeed LBC would be on that list as well. It sometimes feels like you can't turn on your TV or your radio without hearing from one of them. And something that's not in your coverage today, but something I noticed yesterday, is that Matthew Elliott, who of course set up the Taxpayers Alliance and went on to be the head of Vote Leave, turned up at a Trump fundraiser in London last night.
Yes, and Matthew Elliott's wife is still, I think, the chair of Republicans overseas abroad in the UK. And we have this, and I think we're going to see, that's one of the aspects I think we're going to see post-election, is we've seen these growing. We've actually got some more stories to come on the links between Tufton Street and the American right as well. So tune in the coming days for that, James.
Look at that. He's getting the hang of it, isn't he? I am... well, that's come up to 11 o'clock, actually. So the Democracy for Sale newsletter is available on Substack. I'd urge you to go and have a look over there, or follow Peter on Twitter, or follow me and see the links to it. We're going to take Labour's manifesto launch live here on LBC, which means we may interrupt the news, although, frankly, it's unlikely. I think you'll get about 5 minutes of Angela Rayner doing warm-up, and then Keir Starmer will get to his feet. But just to keep you in the loop, that is the plan after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11. In some ways, this manifesto launch that the Labour Party is about to undertake is emblematic of the bigger picture, isn't it? Because they've let it be known that there won't be any surprises. That's almost the essence of what may become known as Starmerism, isn't it? We've let it be known that there won't be any surprises, steady as she goes. What did Theresa May used to call herself? Strong and stable. Do you remember that? Strong and stable. Amazing. So in some ways, although it's odd politics to have a big manifesto launch weeks out from a general election and not have any rabbits in the hat, to announce in advance that there won't be any rabbits in the hat actually speaks to this portrayal of Keir Starmer, which I think is authentic personally, as a sort of very solid and safe pair of hands. But we will, as I say, cross live to that in Manchester. Set the scene as well, actually, but I'm going to have plenty of time to do that, I think, while Angela Rayner is talking, so we can return to the question of Rishi Sunak. And I'm not suggesting, I told you what would happen, didn't I? I said at 10 o'clock, we'll put a clip out. It'll look like I'm feeling sorry for him, and I'll get it from every angle. I'll spend the rest of the day being pilloried. Pilloried, I say. Infamy. They've all got it in for me. I don't feel sorry for him, but I am capable of sympathy for people, even as I find them in some ways deeply unsympathetic. I wouldn't want to see anybody get beaten up. I wouldn't derive pleasure from seeing anybody get beaten up physically. So there comes a point when somebody being beaten up metaphorically or intellectually or mentally or politically can be similarly troubling, I think. That's all. They're all the top team of Keir Starmer's cabinet now, shadow cabinet, coming onto the stage in Manchester. So I'll keep an eye on that while we get back to the more important business of listening to calls. Richard is in Belfast. Richard, what would you like to say?
Hi there. I have great sympathy for him.
That's nice.
Here's a man at the age of 42 who had a good childhood, from what we know.
Yes.
Better than most. Then he went on to have a successful career, or he was head boy. Then he had a successful career making money with his hedge funds. He has a good marriage. He's got 2 children. He enters Parliament. 10 years later, he's the PM. And now, I'm assuming for the first time in his life, he's having to cope with abject failure. And that must be very, very hard for anybody.
You're being completely genuine, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, because when you listed all of those sort of glittering prizes, it could have been construed as sarcasm, but it's not.
No.
And no, I know that. I'm just clarifying for the benefit of the tape, because that's a human reaction to watch. I mean, it's Greek tragedy, isn't it? It's hubris. It's watching somebody, in real time, discover what failure feels like for the very first time in their life.
Yes. None of us get through life pain-free. We all will have incidents, and the more you have, the more experience you have. But he's no experience of having to cope with this.
No, I like that analysis. And it doesn't mean that you would vote for him necessarily, or that you would want anybody, or that you'd even, perhaps you wouldn't even want it to end.
No.
But you can feel sympathy for him in that moment.
Yeah, and I don't think he's got the thick skin of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss.
No.
I think it gets to him. I think it must get to him.
Yeah, that's and that is where the sympathy kicks in for you, because you can see him suffering in a way that Johnson appeared to be psychologically incapable of.
Yes.
And I don't know about you, Richard, but I don't know what's going on in between Liz Truss's ears. I really don't. I don't know whether she's got thick skin or thin skin or no skin or purple skin. She seems to have. What comes after going off the deep end? Where do you go next? Once you've gone off the deep end, where do you go after that? Wherever it is, that's where she's ended up.
I say to my grandson, who's 9, and he's going, and he does something really, really wrong, and he says, I didn't. And I say to him, until you say sorry and accept it, you won't be free of it.
And there's no sorry but.
Sorry.
There's no sorry but either. And he did that. He did that, of course, on the D-Day thing. Richard, thank you. I think he's 44 rather than 42. I did a bit of I think he can't be 10 years younger than me, can he? So I think Truss was the first Prime Minister who was younger than me. That was pretty scary. But soon, that's why I'm all in favour of Keir Starmer. back to a Prime Minister who's considerably older than me. That makes you feel a little better about things. Angela Rayner on stage in Manchester at the moment, but we didn't take the warm-up for Rishi Sunak, so we won't take the warm-up for Keir Starmer either. Instead, we'll head from Belfast to Oxford. That's where Chris is. Chris, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
first-time caller.
Welcome.
You're welcome. So, cards on the table.
Yes.
I am a member of Momentum.
Okay.
So, that's where I sit. Now, whilst on one hand, my schadenfreude is a complete overdrive at the downfall of the Tory party, I have complete sympathy for Rishi Sunak and the predicament that he's in his situation. Because let's just be honest.
Tell me more.
For Tories, power is absolute. That's the thing they crave the most. And they would rather be in power fighting all the fires than not be in power at all. And Sunak has now found himself in a situation where, at best, he's going to end up as leader of the opposition. At worst, he won't even be the opposition. And he's got to go through this 6 weeks of debates and gaffes and handshaking and all the things that go with it, knowing full well he's going to lose the status, authority and power that he craves so much.
And yet he represents everything. He represents everything you despise in politics.
Correct.
I mean, I think that's a nice impulse that you're describing there. Some people think we've both gone mad.
Well, if you worked any other job and your boss said to you, here's a project that's going to last 6 weeks, you need to work really, really hard on it, but by the way, at the end of it, you're definitely going to get fired.
Yeah.
How would you feel?
And
that's what he's doing.
So you can't do. So you can have Schadenfreude and sympathy at the same time. That's quite counterintuitive, but I like it.
Well, of course you can, because it's the personal thing versus the professional thing.
Yeah, so I'm loving it like that. But also, I feel quite sorry for the fella, is what you're saying, because you wouldn't, because you're not a sadist. You're not enjoying the personal suffering of the individual, but you're enjoying the political recalibration that he's at the centre.
I am capable myself of putting myself in his shoes and imagining what he's going through, knowing that he's losing everything that he holds so dear to him.
Takes us back to Richard.
So that he's most likely going to jet off to California after this.
Takes us back to Richard in Belfast, talking about that, the sense of that, you're watching it's like a reality television show. And you're watching someone experience failure on an epic scale. I mean, he could deliver the worst result the Conservative Party has ever seen if things carry on in their current direction. And there's no earthly way anybody can think that's all on him. Not with Liz Truss and Boris Johnson and David Cameron and Theresa May in the rearview mirror. There's no earthly way that the electoral Armageddon that the polls point to, nothing guaranteed, can be laid entirely at the feet of Rishi Sunak. So the more you think about it, the more you can understand the mustering of the sort of feelings that Chris in Oxford and Richard in Belfast describe. 11:11 is the time. Keeping an eye on this manifesto launch in Manchester. Do we know who that is? Should I recognise him? Is it the little... I should say that out loud. Is it the Iceland fella? Okay, so he was trying to get himself a Conservative seat about 10 minutes ago, failed, and now's come out as a massive cheerleader for Labour. That's funny how the world turns. Anyway, Peter's in Wimbledon to steer us back to Sunak. Peter, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Peter.
Right, first and foremost, let's get the record straight. How can this geezer, like, are you saying Sunak?
Yes.
Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, that's the fella.
How can he say...
Yeah.
that, he's going to make things better and, he's got a positive outlook on this election. Now, let's just wind back, over the last 4 prime ministers. So obviously we've got Sunak. Okay, he's kind of made good of what Liz Truss
trying to undo some of the damage that she did.
Yeah, and, fair play to him. It's not the easiest job in the world, not just for the UK, but for any country, right? Yeah. But... my point with this geezer is he is so out of touch with not just me as, a born and bred Cockney from, the East End, now lives in Wimbledon. I've done well for myself. I struggled growing up, but when I was growing up in the 80s, we had, I watched Canary Wharf rise from the marshes of the docks, right?
Yes.
We had cable and wireless. My mum and dad still struggled, but we managed to have that because it was like reduced rate for people in the local area. I still had a good education. I come from a family. I'm a former nurse myself. I've got other members of my family that are nurses and gone to university. I've studied in pathology. I'm now a lead trainer for a medical company. I have done well for myself, but I'm still struggling.
So hang on a minute, because I think you're a lifelong Tory voter. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I was.
Well, you were. But why does Sunak strike you as being more out of touch with your lived experience than, for example, Boris Johnson and David Cameron, who both went to Eton?
James, I'll be honest with you, mate.
Yeah.
We've got to look at this logically.
I'm trying to.
You have King Charles III,
that's the fella.
King, Commonwealth, the whole shebang. But this geezer has got more money than the king.
This is fascinating. You're the second caller to say this. You can't get past the size of his wad.
Please don't misunderstand me. And all the other listeners. No, I don't mean that personally. I mean, like people as a whole. Okay. It's not a personal note, James.
No, exactly.
A lot of respect to you, mate.
Thank you. Ditto.
But at the same time, okay, no one's saying the geezer hasn't worked hard. Elon Musk worked hard. One of the probably the richest man in the world. Bill Gates, created market. They've worked for their fortune. Good luck to him.
Yeah.
But how can you turn around and say, you just got to look at his family background, for the love of God?
So when he starts talking about things, you just can't believe him, is what you're saying. Because, Tony Benn was minted, and he spoke up all the time for the poor and the working class, and I believed him. But there's something about the combination of Sunak's attributes that leaves you thinking that he's inauthentic or just implausible.
I'm sure a little bit of both, mate.
There you go, 52-48.
His wife is, she's got her fortune, but then again, has she really worked for all that fortune? Or
It's her dad. But I hear that's really interesting. So, just before we go, how do you think you're going to vote this time as a lifelong Tory voter, ex-lifelong Tory?
James, I'll be honest with you. I've not got a lot of... I will vote because obviously if you don't vote, you don't have a say. It's as simple as that. Put up, vote, or put up and shut up. But
you don't know yet. You're going to decide on the day. And good luck to you. 16 minutes after 11. I'm cracking on only because I've got to keep an eye. I'm spinning plates. We're going to take some adverts. But if Keir Starmer starts speaking, we will crash them like a wrecking ball.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 11 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We didn't really get that many calls from... Well, we did actually, didn't we? So I was just going to say people who voted Tory in 2017 and or 2019 and have got a view on why it's all gone so badly, if you like, for Rishi Sunak. But there's another person coming to the stage now to speak at this manifesto launch. Do we know who this is? Should I know? I'm not very good at this job, am I? It's time we were honest with each other. It's my job to know who these people are. And who was the last fella? I see. No, that's fine. It was just a member of the public, if you like, a voter who was describing the hardship that he and his family face, and no doubt designed to establish that Keir Starmer would make things better. And this chap here, I've no embarrassment at all about not recognising him. He's a music teacher called Nathaniel, probably speaking about the need for improvement in our education system. They're at the Cooperative Group headquarters in Manchester for this launch, and the optics of it are quite interesting. It looks like a much more, what word would you use? Not business-like, but a much more impressive environment than the one that Rishi Sunak elected to launch his manifesto in a couple of days ago, which looked to be like a sort of hospitality suite at the Silverstone racecourse. I could be wrong, but just optics can be important. Who looks like they are a government in waiting and who looks like they're a sort of a sales conference for bathroom fixture companies. It's 19 after 11. Will's in Lincoln, just to steer us back to the Sunak conversation, with the warning, Will, that I may cut you off in your prime if Keir Starmer turns up. What would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello,
you definitely do a better job than I do. It's just to say I am by no means a Tory voter. I'm not.
Yeah.
But this guy is come in. He's been there for 2 years. I won't be voting Tory, just so you know.
Sure.
But he's come in, and I just feel he's getting the brunt of everything that Boris has done, that Liz has done, and they're getting away with it, or got away with it. Well, I know it's election time, so it comes to the forefront, but Boris is still out there playing his style, and he's still seen as the hero that they want back.
Only by the Daily Mail and Nadine Dorries. I mean, everybody else can remember where his approval ratings were when he got elected. Yeah. Never mind when he got chased out of town by his own party, and of course subsequently turned out to have been lying to Parliament and was adjudicated as such by a jury of his own peers, a committee of his own peers, including Conservative MPs. But it is a bit. I like this humanity, Will, because it is as if it's as if a bunch of kids broke into the tuck shop. And I'm showing my boarding school background here a bit. And when the beaks turned up, when the teachers turned up, there was only one kid there. So 5 kids broke into the tuck shop. 4 of them filled their boots and legged it. One of them was reaching for the pear drops on the top shelf, and didn't realise everyone else had run away. And he was the only one that got caught. It feels a bit like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Definitely. Like I say, you've got Liz Truss. She's still spouting whatever she spouted in America and coming back here, but you can see he wants to be in control.
But we're forgetting some of the awfulness. I mean, some of the stuff he's gone all in on the Rwanda debacle. He was a big fan of Brexit. He's not exactly been helpful for the country's most vulnerable people. But you can't somehow see everything through that lens. Sometimes you just see a human being who is suffering and you react accordingly. Sooner it's over. I tell you what the phrase is. It's taken us 1 hour and 22 minutes to get here. You just want him to be put out of his misery, don't you?
in a nice way.
In a nice way, yeah, obviously. Not involving a bolt gun or anything like that, or lethal injections. But you do. You just want. And I tell you, who looks more married to the idea that he just cannot wait to be excused, put out of his misery, as in this just comes to an end. And that is Rishi Sunak. 22 minutes after 11 is the time. Owen is in Belfast. Just before that, 2 things have happened in the course of the last half an hour or so. John's been in touch to say, I love the way your echophonia. That's not a word I'd heard before. He says, I love the way your echophonia kicks in when you talk to a Cockney. You sounded like you were born in Hackney when you were talking to Peter in Wimbledon. Did I? Really? I used to be terrible at that. I thought I'd got a lot better. But Eleanor did say, after we bid farewell to Peter Gagan and his rich Irish tones, she did say as he left the building, did you say grand to Peter? And I said, I don't think I said it on air, but I definitely said it off air. As soon as the microphones went off, we headed towards the news while Peter was here. I looked up from the microphone and I went, oh, that was grand. It is a form of echophonia, even though he'd not said it. Anyway, staying on the island of Ireland, Owen's in Belfast. Owen, what would you like to say?
Well, it's grand you let me on, anyway.
Well played. Go on.
I just think maybe you're missing something this morning, James.
Yes.
I'm sort of feeling sorry for you this morning.
There's a lot of it about. Go on, fill me in, help me out.
I honestly think you underestimate the basic nastiness of the guy.
Yes. Go on.
I'm talking about it. I remember Johnson making a comment about Savile and Sunak nodding his head, and it just annoyed me so much. It stuck in my head, and when I first heard you saying you felt sorry for him, I said, God, I have to ring in and tell him that, there's a basic nastiness in that guy.
A snidiness, you mean? A sort of you could see him not necessarily being the ringleader of the bullies, but being rather enjoying the bullying.
He's at the back of the crowd.
Yeah. But I can still feel sorry for him because, if the crowd turned on him and started kicking 7 shades of blue out of him, I would want them to stop at some point, Owen, and so would you.
I don't know.
Behave yourself. This is all metaphorical, but yeah, okay. Well, there's a psychological distinction of sorts. So no sympathy whatsoever for Sunak, but a little bit of sympathy for me for losing my marbles, it would appear.
Well, a wee bit that way.
That's very kind of you. Look at that.
Not at all.
So you
it's a grand show anyway.
It has its moments, Owen. Thank you. 25 minutes after 11 now for the manifesto launch that we were told was going to begin at 11. We've now got a first-time voter called Holly up at the podium. I'm questioning our decision not to take it all live Should we have taken it all live? Do we know who she's going to vote for? Holly turning up at the Labour manifesto launch 25 minutes after 11. It's still the time. And we are still waiting for... everyone's played Four Yorkshiremen with me now. We're still waiting for Keir Starmer to come to the stage and deliver his manifesto launch speech, which we will take live just as we took Rishi Sunak's. Tuck Shop. This is the Four Yorkshiremen tribute acts coming into my inbox now. We were lucky to have an empty crisp bag. I hear you. Some people, I'm told, didn't even have Sky TV when they were growing up. And just to go back to Peter in Wimbledon, who activated my echophonia, apparently, when he was talking about cable and wireless, if you, like me, got a little bit confused, it was a nod back to Rishi Sunak talking about not having Sky TV. He was talking about the special deal that they got to get what was then cable TV, I guess, as opposed to Sky TV. There's now a promotional video playing at the cooperative headquarters in Manchester. None of us can see it, not just because we're on the radio, but actually even the television cameras are not picking up the video either. So what you have on the live television feeds at the moment is a room full of... Shall we cross live now? Let's cross live now and put me out of my misery.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ange, for your introduction, for everything that you're doing. I think I'm taking your bus this afternoon. Thank you, Richard, for your words. Thank you, Daniel, for reminding us why we're doing what we're doing. Nathaniel, I've heard your story before, but every single time it gets to me, and I'm sure gets to every single person that listens to what you say. And I'm humbled by your determination to make sure that things are better for those in the next generation. And Holly, that was fantastic. Holly is 18 years old. Anybody who stood on a stage like this knows how hard it is for all of us to stand up here. That's the first time Holly's done anything like this in her life. Fantastic, Holly. And taken together, isn't this clear evidence of a changed Labour Party and clear evidence of the change we need for our country? A changed... Thank you very much. Yeah. We gave up on being a party of protest 5 years ago. We want to be a party of power. And that's not in the script, but that is part of the change. And Holly, can I also say at the start of this that this party respects and will never forget the contribution that your generation made during the pandemic. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming to Manchester. Thank you all for the hard work that's gone into this campaign so far, into this project. 4.5 years of work, changing our party to put it back in the service of working people. And now, the next step, the most important step, changing Britain, rebuilding our country, so that it too served the interests of working people. And what a place to launch our plan to do so. The home of the Cooperative Group, an organisation that has long believed, as we do, that the pursuit of social justice and economic growth must go hand in hand. A day where I am proud, in this place, in this city, to launch Labour's general election manifesto, a manifesto for wealth creation, a plan to change Britain. Because today we can turn the page. Today we can lay a new foundation of stability. And on that foundation we can start to rebuild Britain. A Britain renewed by an old argument that we serve working people as their ambition drives our country forward. Because there is so much potential in this country, so much possibility if we stand together as four nations and back the ambition people have for their family and their community. I see it everywhere I go. Potential held back. I spoke to Will, he's a fireman in Milton Keynes. He works really hard. What he wants, his dream, is to own his own home. A roof over his head that he can call his own. As well as a firefighter, he's got 2 other jobs, but he can't afford a mortgage. His dream will not be realised. It's the price he's paying. I went to Aldhay Hospital, not far from here. It is a brilliant children's hospital, absolutely brilliant. And the day I went in, I went to the ward where they were doing operations on 0 to 2-year-old children, heart operations. It's incredible to just see what they do, the courage of the individuals in there. Heart surgery, the brilliance of the NHS staff. I found that totally humbling, completely uplifting, until I found out that at Aldhay Hospital, the commonest cause for admissions for operations for 6 to 10-year-olds is children going there to have their teeth taken out because they are decaying. That is the price that they are paying. So just imagine if instead a Labour government gives Will and Daniel the affordable homes that they need. Imagine if instead a Labour government tackles the rot of tooth decay. Imagine what those nurses and doctors could do with a Labour government on their side. Now, don't get me wrong, these challenges don't disappear overnight if Labour wins. We don't have a magic wand. But what we do have, what this manifesto represents, is a credible long-term plan, a plan built on stable foundations with clear first steps. Tough spending rules that will keep taxes and inflation low. NHS waiting times cut, with 40,000 extra appointments every week. A border security command to smash the criminal smuggling gangs. Great British Energy to cut bills in your home for good. More police in your town, cracking down on antisocial behaviour. And 6,500 new teachers in your school, giving your children the start in life that they deserve. But also a plan that is much more than a list of policies. A plan for change, for growth, for giving our children their future back. A chance to refocus politics on the things that matter to your family. The era of sticking plaster politics, the chaos and division replaced by a government back in the service of you and your family. And make no mistake, that is the cause of this changed Labour Party. We have written that argument through every word of this manifesto, because it's urgent. Britain's lost its balance. It is too hard for working people to get on. Opportunity is not spread evenly enough. And too many communities are not just locked out of the wealth that we create, they're disregarded as sources of dynamism in the first place. Ignored by the toxic idea that economic growth is something the few hand down to the many. Today, we turn the page on that forever. Because that idea is part of the story of the past 14 years, part of everything they put you through. When they crashed the pound to give tax cuts to the richest 1%, when they decimated your public services because of a mess made by banks, when they failed to invest in clean British energy, so we were exposed when Putin invaded Ukraine. That idea was there. A Tory inability to face the future, rather than change, reform and strengthen government so that it can intervene in partnership with business to give you and your family stability in this insecure world. And it doesn't matter how many new policies the Tories throw at the wall, hoping that some of them will stick. None of them face up to the reality of this future. But mark my words, this changed Labour Party will. We have a plan in this manifesto, a total change of direction, laser focused on our cause, stability, growth, investment and reform, a government back in the service of your family, ready to change Britain. We will restore the foundations of good government, national security, border security, economic security. We will make new choices to reform our economy and public services. Hard choices, choices ducked for years. These choices will be fully funded and fully costed. That is non-negotiable. You cannot play fast and loose with the public finances. We've lived through the damage that this does. That government we have now played fast and loose with the finances, and working people paid the price. Just after Liz Truss's mini-budget, I went to Wolverhampton a week or so afterwards, and I met there a couple. They had a 3-year-old child. They decided they want a second child. They'd chosen a new home that was big enough to accommodate their new family. They got a mortgage offer that they could afford. Liz Truss crashed the economy. Their mortgage offer went through the roof. They couldn't afford it. They pulled out. They couldn't move to their new home. They felt they were held back. But they also took the decision that they could no longer afford to have a second child. And they will live with that for the rest of their lives. That's the price that they're paying. So I make no apologies for being careful with working people's money, and no apologies for ruling out tax rises on working people. And this isn't just the election. Don't think it's just politics. This is an issue of conviction. I don't believe it's fair to raise taxes on working people when they're already paying this much, particularly in a cost of living crisis. So let me spell it out. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT. That is a manifesto commitment. And another thing, because there may be some people here today who say, where's the surprise? Where's the rabbit out of the hat? To which I say, if you want politics as pantomime, I hear Clapton is nice this time of year. But seriously, we have to come to terms with this. Britain needs stability, not more chaos. I set out our long-term plan in this room 18 months ago. And that plan stands because it's the right plan. We did the work properly. Our responsibility to give a clear direction to businesses, communities, everyone invested in Britain's future. We took that seriously. So yes, Those 5 national missions, higher growth, safer streets, cleaner energy, more opportunity, the NHS back on its feet, they remain at the core of this manifesto. But if they are to offer hope and clarity through these times, if they are to show, despite the hard road, the light of the certain destination, then we must keep to that road, no matter the short-term ebbs and flows of politics, even in a campaign. That's what mission-driven government means. A chance to stop us bobbing along until the next crisis blows us off course, and instead make sure we can keep going through the storm. Stability over chaos, long-term over short-term, an end to the desperate era of gestures and gimmicks, and a return to the serious business of rebuilding our country. And on that foundation of stability, we start to rebuild. A rebuilding that must begin, first and foremost, with new choices on economic growth. That is the mandate we seek from Britain at this election, a mandate for economic growth. Because the way we create wealth in this country is broken. It leaves far too many people feeling insecure. People who are working hard and doing the right thing. So we will reform it. And we will keep on reforming it until it delivers for them. Wealth creation is our number one priority. Growth is our core business. The only route to improving the prosperity of our country and the living standards of working people. And that's why we made it our first national mission in government. But we must change our approach so it comes from every community, not just shared with every community. Redistribution can't be a one-word plan for our poorest towns and regions. No, we need to give them the tools they need, back their pride and potential, growth for every community, growth from every community. That is the path to national renewal. And now, some people say that how you grow the economy is not a central question, that it's not about how you create wealth, but how you tax it, how you spend it, how you slice the cake. That's all that matters. So let me be crystal clear. This manifesto is a total rejection of that argument. Because if you transform the nature of the jobs market, if you transform the infrastructure that supports investment in our economy, if you reform the planning regime, start to unlock the potential of billions upon billions of pounds worth of projects that are ready to go, held up by the blockers of aspiration, then clearly that does so much more for our long-term growth prospects. And the same is true of public services. If we grew the economy at anything like the rate of the last Labour government, we'd have tens of billions of pounds worth of investment for our public services every year. So if you take nothing else away from today, let it be this. This changed Labour Party has a plan for growth. We are pro-business and pro-worker, the party of wealth creation. We will reform the planning rules, a choice ignored for 14 years, and build the homes and infrastructure you need. We will level up your rights at work, a choice ignored for 14 years, and raise your wages and your security. We will create a new industrial strategy, a choice ignored for 14 years, and we will back it with a national wealth fund, invest in clean steel, new ports, gigafactories, and we will create 650,000 new jobs for communities like yours. Relight the fires of renewal across all 4 of our great nations. You can choose a different path. You have the power. You can choose to take back control from Westminster. More democracy for your community. New powers over transport, skills, employment. Unlock the pride and potential in every community. That is a different choice you can make. You can cut your bills for good with a new energy company funded by a tax on the oil and gas giants, owned by the taxpayer, making money for the taxpayer, powering your home with clean British energy. That is a different choice you can make. And you can choose to get our NHS back on its feet. End the 8 a.m. scramble. Back our NHS staff. Get the best technology in their hands. Slash waiting lists in your hospital. Funded by taking on the non-doms and tax avoiders. That is a different choice you can make. And I'll tell you another choice you can make. You can choose to live in a country that believes in and backs its young people, the future of our country. I am fed up of politicians lecturing young people about their responsibility to our nation, when those politicians fail in their responsibility to the future. And after what young people did during the pandemic, what they gave up for people, let's be blunt, more at risk than them, that adds insult to injury. But more than that, it tears up the unwritten contract, the bonds of respect that hold these 4 great nations together, the values that make us who we are, the responsibilities we owe to each other, past, present, and future. My dad was a tool maker. He worked in a factory. My mum was a nurse. We didn't have a lot when we were growing up. And like millions of working class children now, I grew up in a cost of living crisis. I know what it feels like to be embarrassed to bring your mates home because the carpet is threadbare and the window's cracked. I was actually responsible for that because I did put the football through it. But we didn't have the money to fix it. Or to be honest, the time and the energy. Economic insecurity drains you of that as well. But look, what always comforted my parents was the idea that in the end, Britain would give their children a fair chance. The old saying, the story we still tell our children, work hard and you can achieve anything. That meant something. My parents believed in that. But the question now, after 14 years, is do we? Do kids like those in Somerstown, a very poor part of my constituency, one of the poorest parts of Europe, do they look out of their window to the glittering success of London, 300 yards and another world away, and believe that success could belong to them? Do parents here in Manchester, or in Glasgow, Cardiff, Plymouth, Sunderland, Sussex, Stoke-on-Trent, do they believe, with the certainty that they deserve, that the future will be better for their children? Because in the Britain I want to leave to my children, they do. And we can build it. We can restore the dream of home ownership to 1.5 million families. We can create 3,000 new nurseries to give them the best start in life. We can roll out a new generation of technical excellence colleges, world-class vocational education, respected by all, grounding young aspiration in the soil of their community. We can guarantee for every young person a job placement or apprenticeship when they're out of work. We can invest in their mental health, their physical health, their dental health. We can reform the curriculum to prepare them for their world. We can create new youth hubs to give them something to do in their community. Raise their wages if they're at work. Give them the power of the vote. Tackle injustice with a new Race Equality Act. And with our mission on clean power, we can lead the way on climate. Finally show our responsibility to their future, a fairer, healthier and more secure Britain at the service of working people, with growth from every community, a Britain ready to restore that promise, the bond that reaches through the generations and says, this country will be better for your children. That is the change on offer on July the 4th. That is our plan, and I invite you all to join our mission to stop the chaos, turn the page, and start to rebuild our country. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You are listening to LBC, where Keir Starmer has just concluded his speech launching the Labour manifesto, and the questions from the assembled media are about to begin. You're listening to James O'Brien. And the time now is 11:52. Probably looking at probably a similar amount of time now to be dedicated to the questions as was taken up by Keir Starmer's speech. Looks like Mystery Hour is going to suffer this week, so prepare yourself to answer one question in the final hour of the programme, and that will be, what did you think of this speech? What did you think of this launch? And of course, you've had the great pleasure this week of hearing both manifesto launches from both major parties on this programme. Comparisons impossible to avoid. Wealth creation is the number one priority. Growth is our core business. Probably the biggest takeaway from the speech.
A number of questions from the media. And I'm starting with Chris from the BBC. Chris, I can't... There you are. Sorry, Chris. I've got you. Chris.
Thank you. Chris Mason, BBC News. Keir Starmer, talk to the voter right now who fears that you might only really say what you're going to do after any victory rather than before. We live in an era, don't we, of a scepticism, a cynicism about politics, perhaps an anti-politics mood. Address those voters, and you know that there are those who will fear that. Thank you.
Let me address them directly, because this manifesto is a manifesto for change. A total rejection, Chris, of the cynicism, of the idea that we can't do any better, that we can only hope to flatline, and that we cannot rebuild our country. It is a total rejection of that idea, based on 4 years of hard work, hundreds of engagements with those that will deliver for us, so we can build a future which genuinely will be better for our children. I understand the cynicism. I understand that after 14 years of this, for many people, the hope has been beaten out of them. But this is a manifesto for hope. It is a plan for growth, a plan for change, a plan for wealth creation. I will never accept the defeatism that says we can't do better than this. We can, we will, and with a Labour government, we'll get the opportunity to rebuild our country. Thank you, Chris. Beth.
Thank you. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Keir Starmer, this is a 132-page document. On the cover it says change, but there's not a single new policy in it you haven't already announced. There's no new retail offer for voters. Rishi Sunak threw the kitchen sink at his manifesto. You won't even take the safety catch off yours. Is this a Captain Caution manifesto designed to protect your poll lead? Thank you.
No. It is a serious plan for the future of our country. And every single policy in this document, policy after policy after policy, has been carefully thought through and tested to ensure that we can deliver it. I am not going to do what Rishi Sunak did, which is to offer things that he can't deliver because they're unfunded. People have had too much of that. They're fed up with that. This is a serious plan, carefully thought through. It's not about rabbits out the hat. It's not about pantomime. We've had that. I'm running as a candidate to be Prime Minister, not a candidate to run the circus. Thank you very much, Beth. Robert, ITV. Yeah. Robert.
Keir Starmer, you say you want people to trust you, you want to restore stability to the UK, but it is surely the opposite of that to make the bogus claim that you can get growth up sufficiently by next year to prevent significant cuts to public services. How are you going to avoid a return to austerity?
We are not going to return to austerity. I ran a public service for 5 years, the Crown Prosecution Service. I lived through austerity. I'm never going to allow a Labour government to do that to our public services. Never. We have an immediate injection into our public services, the 40,000 appointments each and every week in our NHS to get our waiting lists down. The teachers that we will put into our secondary school, 6,500. But Robert, we have here a plan for growth, a plan for wealth creation and steps we can take, a plan to deal with the planning regulations. That hasn't been done. It can be done. It can be done at speed. They're tough decisions. We'll do it. We've got a national wealth fund to invest in the future of our country. GB Energy, an energy company to keep our bills down, an industrial strategy, a training programme for the skills we need of the future. All of these things haven't been done in the last 14 years. I do understand why people think they can't be done because of the damage that's been done over the last 14 years. They can and they will. We will turn around growth in this country and create the wealth we need for our country and our public services. Thank you, Robert, very much. Chris at GB News.
Chris Hope, GB News. Keir Starmer, you're so far ahead in the polls. Should we prepare for a one-party socialist state, as the Tories say? And is that a good thing? And also, just quickly, you want to reduce net migration. What on earth does that mean? Is that below 100,000 a year?
Look, Chris, let's reject the cynicism of the Tory campaign. All they want to do in a general election is to suppress the vote. I know that not a single vote has been cast in this election. Polls don't predict the future, and every single vote has to be earned. And we will earn it with our plan for growth, our plan for creation of wealth in the future. So that is our plan. And yes, I do want a mandate to be able to put this plan into action. I do want people to vote Labour to give us the mandate that we need. I want people to vote for a Labour candidate in their constituency so that Labour MP can sit on the government benches delivering this manifesto for them and their constituents. Yes, I want that mandate. Change is what we need, but if you want change, you have to vote for change, and that means voting Labour. Thank you very much, Chris. Natasha, LBC. Chris, I didn't do your second half of the question. I'll come back to it and I've dealt with Natasha.
Hi, Natasha Clark from LBC. It's 3 weeks today until polling day. The Tories are warning of a Labour supermajority. How confident are you feeling right now? Are you feeling like the campaign's going well? And are you worried that maybe a Labour win for you might just be off the back of people voting for you because they hate the Tories so much? Thank you.
No. We've had plenty of examples when people don't like the Tories and they're a real mess, but Labour hasn't been in a position to win. That's why we changed the Labour Party, precisely because we know that the Tories will mess it up, but we have to be in a position to win. We only win if we change the Labour Party. When people look away from the government and look at the alternative, they have to see a positive alternative, and that's what they see in the Labour Party. I don't, take anything for granted as we go to the final 3 weeks of this campaign. Yes, we are enjoying the campaign. I won't deny that. We've waited 4.5 years. We've worked for 4.5 years to get to this point. Election year, the chance to do what we came into politics to do, which is to change the lives of millions of people for the better with a Labour government. We'll do that with our sleeves rolled up, a serious plan for the future, and take our argument to every single doorstep across the country and ask people to back the case for change, ask people to give us a mandate to change this country for them, their family, their community, and our country. Thank you very much. Chris, you did do a double question, but nonetheless, on immigration, we do need to have lower immigration. As you know, immigration is at pretty much the highest on record, bar the number just a few months ago. So this government has lost control of immigration. It's important to look at the reasons for that. And the main driving reason is because they haven't got any skills strategy. We haven't got the skills that we need in this country. And that's why not only is our plan here a plan for growth, it will also deal with immigration, because this government has gone to immigration as their growth lever. I want to go to skills, wealth creation, investing in businesses in this country. Thank you, Chris. That's not an invite to everybody to do 2 questions, by the way. But out of respect for Chris, I did it. Sophie, the Mirror.
Sophie Huskisson from the Daily Mirror. Sir Keir, your manifesto says you'll develop an ambitious strategy to reduce child poverty. Do you have a target for how many kids you want to lift out of poverty?
Well, we will have a strategy for dealing with poverty, just as the last Labour government did. And we took millions of children out of poverty, and we will do so again. That does require a strong plan to deal with those issues that bear down on poverty and children. That's housing, that's education, that's health, that's good jobs, and it's wealth creation. Because without the wealth creation that we need for our country, it's very difficult to do the support that we need in our country. And that's why I say we are the party of wealth creation. This is a plan for wealth creation. It is a plan for growth. That is the single driving mission of what I hope will be an incoming Labour government. Thank you, Sophie. Martina from The Sun. Martina.
Hello, Sir Keir. Martina Bett from The Sun. In order to clear the asylum backlog, you said that you will let small boat migrants currently here enter the asylum system. But what is the plan for new people who arrive here illegally? Because there is nothing about that in the manifesto. Will they be able to apply for a claim? If so, isn't that just an incentive for more people to come?
Well, look, those that are already here are already in the system. They're just not being processed. And that means the government has got a hopeless situation where tens of thousands of people are not being processed. So the one thing that can't happen is that they're removed to the country they came from, even if they've got no right to be here. That is the chaotic state of this government. They're not processing the claim. Even clear cases where people shouldn't be here, they can't be removed. We've got to fix that. We've got to fix the loss of control of our borders under this government. Nobody should be making that trip across the channel in small boats. And the way that we will do that is with our Border Security Command, which is set up specifically with new powers, a new command with new resources to smash the gangs that are running the vile trade of putting vulnerable people in boats to go across the channel. Now, before I was in this job, I was the chief prosecutor for 5 years. I've worked with law enforcement across countries to smash terrorist gangs, sophisticated terrorist gangs, and I will never accept that the only gang that apparently we can't smash is the vile smuggling gangs that are running this trade. I'll never accept that. Thank you so much. Chris from The Times.
Chris Smythe from The Times. You've made it very clear that you're not putting up taxes on working people. You've left other taxes on the table, and you've also said there'll be no return to austerity. You're putting a lot of emphasis on growth, but you know, as you said, there is no magic wand. There is a chance that your growth plans don't happen as quickly as you want. So people want to know, what is your instinct in that situation if the sums don't add up? Is it to borrow more? Is it to cut spending? Or is it to put up taxes?
Chris, this manifesto is a total rejection of that defeatist approach, that the only levers are tax and spend. It's a total rejection of that. It's a plan for growth. I accept there's no magic wand. I accept that you don't get growth without a plan. That's what all the forecasts are based on, that things won't change, can't change, will flat line. That's why we're having this discussion about tax and spend. I'd reject that. That's why this is a plan for growth, a carefully thought through plan for growth. Hundreds and hundreds of conversation engagements with businesses, with communities, with local representatives and leaders about the change that we can bring about. And some of it is obvious stuff, it's common sense stuff. Planning holds up infrastructure all of the time. Years and years are lost in pretty well every infrastructure project. We can't get things done. We can't get things moving. We can't build things, whether that's big projects or the houses that we need. We don't have an industrial strategy that actually makes sure we've got the skills and the initiatives in the places that we need them. We haven't got a national wealth fund at the moment, which invests in the future of our country and gets the private sector to invest with it. All of these things will make a material difference, and I have absolute confidence in the plan for growth that we're putting before the country. And I will not accept the defeatism that says all that we can hope for in this country is to flatline. That is the absolute opposite of the hope that we inject through this manifesto. Thank you, Chris, very much. Ben, Telegraph.
Thank you, Ben Riley-Smith, The Telegraph. Keir Starmer, your rhetoric suggests you want taxes coming down, but this manifesto explicitly has taxes going up, I think in the costings pages by about 7 to 8 billion. So can you just be crystal clear, you're going into the election with a platform of tax rises?
The tax rises we've set out in the manifesto were there's no surprises, Ben, this morning, as you will see. You'll have gone through the document quickly. You'll go through it, no doubt, at length later on. There are no taxes, no tax rises that we haven't already announced. Yes, we want to bear down properly on the non-dom tax status and make sure that super rich pay their fair share in this country. Yes, we want the oil and gas companies to pay fair tax on the massive profits that they're making. Yes, we want to make sure that private equity loopholes aren't there again for wealthy. And yes, we've taken the tough decision in relation to VAT. So we will take all of those measures. But what you won't see in this manifesto is any plan that requires tax rises over and above those that we have already set out. Because we've been very, very clear, particularly in relation to working people, no increase in income tax, no increase in national insurance, and no increase in VAT. Absolutely clearly set out in this manifesto. Thank you, Ben. Jason from the Daily Mail.
Thanks, Sir Keir. You've said that taxes are too high. Just to follow on Ben's question, your manifesto, I think, is going to put them up about £8 billion. The Tories say they're going to cut them by 17 billion. Are you happy fighting the election on that tax divide? And can I just pick up one from Beth's interview with you last night, which I don't think you ever quite got round to answering. You're among friends here. Did you really think Jeremy Corbyn was going to be a great PM?
Well, look, on the tax question, you can see what the Conservatives are doing. Every day they are desperately putting a new policy, a new gimmick on the table, which is unfunded. Now, if there's one lesson from Liz Truss and what happened to the economy, it's if you make unfunded tax cuts, then it damages the economy and working people pay the price. And I was in Stafford just a few weeks ago during this campaign, in the kitchen of a woman who is a paramedic and her wife who works in a jewellery shop. They bought their house 5 years ago. They were on a fixed rate mortgage. They've got 2 kids. That has come to an end after 5 years. They've hunted around, but the best mortgage they can get is one that's hundreds of pounds more, and they can't afford it, and they're going to have to move. That is the price you pay for unfunded tax cuts. And Rishi Sunak, if there's one thing that he was supposed to do, it was to provide the stability after Liz Truss, and here he is repeating it. And it'll be working people who pay the price for that. And in relation to Jeremy Corbyn in the last election, I didn't think we would win the last election. I didn't think that we were in a state to win it. That is reinforced by the work that we have now done. We were rejected by the country, and first decision I took was if you get rejected that badly by the country, you don't look at the voter and say, what on earth were you doing? You look at your party and you change it. And I've led this party through that change. And Jeremy Corbyn is not just not a Labour candidate, he's expelled from this party. That is how much change we have brought around. Kitty at the Eye.
Thank you, Kitty Donaldson from the I newspaper. You're giving the impression of a man in a hurry. Tony Blair made the Bank of England independent in the first week of his landslide. What would Prime Minister Keir Starmer do in the first week of a Labour government? And how long will you give voters before they judge you on your ability to make changes?
The first thing I'd do is return politics to service. To serve this country. I came into politics to serve. I had a career in the law before this. My wife rather thinks I should have stayed with it. But I changed. But I changed because I wanted to serve my country. And I think politics in the last 10 to 14 years has become too much about self-entitlement and not enough about service. So the mindset change, if we are able to come into government, on day one, the most important thing will be service, country first, party second. Every decision will be dictated by that. Is it country first, service of the country? And I'll be judged on that service, as I have been in the past. I worked with the police service of Northern Ireland, changing that so that it had the confidence of both communities with others. I worked at the Crown Prosecution Service, a service prosecuting every criminal case in England and Wales to protect the public. And I've changed the Labour Party into a party that, again, is once again in the service of working people. And what we are now seeking is the opportunity to change our country, to put it back in the service of working people. That will be the big change from day one, and everything else hangs off that. Country first, party second. Thank you, Kitty, very much. Pippa from The Guardian. Pippa.
Pippa Crerar from The Guardian. We all know that voters' trust and confidence in British politics has never been lower. There's been numerous political scandals over the years that have played a big role in that. If you win the election, will you set up your new Ethics and Integrity Commission within the first 100 days? And are you watering down your ban on ex-ministers lobbying the government from 5 years? Rishi Sunak has struggled to lead a government of integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. But can you do any better?
Yes, and I'm determined that we will do better because I've been in public service all my life. I've been held to high standards all my life. I've led from the front all of my life. And yes, we will get on with changing the codes and the ethics codes and the guidance that is in place straight away in government. But I know that nobody will believe it's changed until they see the action that follows. You do need strong codes. You do need good commissioners. But you need to take action. And you need to take action when people breach those codes. And that's what we will do. Just as I knew when we were changing the Labour Party, I said on day one I would rip out anti-Semitism by the roots. I knew I'd be judged not by what I said on day one, but what I did on day 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And on and on and on. And so it will be the same in government. We are going to turn this around to put politics back in the service of working people. We'll be judged by the actions that we take as well as the promises that we make. Thank you, Pippa, very, very much. Jim from the FT.
Jim Pickard, Financial Times. The private equity industry has been lobbying very hard for you to dilute the removal of the carried interest loophole that industry enjoys. It seems pretty clear from the documents in the manifesto that you're still hoping to raise over £500 million from doing that. Is it your guarantee that the amount they pay in tax will go up from 28p in the pound to 45%, or is there still some wriggle room in that policy? Thank you.
Jim, we are absolutely determined to change the rules, to close this loophole, and the money that is set out in the schedule at the back of the manifesto tells you how much yield there will be from that. So that's the plan, that's how we'll carry it out. And what you will see, and thank you for drawing attention to it, for everybody who's got the document, is in the last few pages, about page 109, Rachel is demonstrating the page that says every policy is fully costed and fully funded. She's got it open. She wrote every word of it. And that is important because you can only build the wealth that we need in this country on the foundation of stability. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, all of you. Onward we go to change. Thank you.
You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Keir Starmer has just concluded the Q&A section of the Labour Party's manifesto launch. I think he took every question going there, pretty much. I don't know that... I mean, they may not have had their hands in the air. I don't know that I heard Channel 4 or ITV, but whether or not... No, ITV were there. Of course they were. It was Robert Peston, who never says his name. Everybody else says their name. It's funny the things you notice, isn't it? Natasha got on, of course, which is a courtesy that Rishi Sunak didn't pay LBC listeners earlier this week. So it means that Miss JR is done for. If that doesn't shift the polls in the Tories' favour, then frankly, I don't know what will. Starmer scuppered mystery hour, #. But I do want to know what you thought of that. I really do. A quick word to Mohammed, who I think has sent this message to the wrong account. I think you might have clicked on the wrong WhatsApp when you sent this message, Mohammed. He's just been in touch to say, I want to watch Master and Commander tonight. Do you? So thanks for that. And this from Alan, blimey, he was good. Johnny in Hove says that was a tour de force by Starmer. And what I would like, and also that, I don't know if it was a deliberate joke about Rachel Reeves, who has, I think, got into trouble in the past on this front, but when Keir Starmer said she wrote every word of it, I don't think that was a deliberate joke, Isaac. If it was very, very funny. And yeah, there was, Nigel, even a question from GB News. No, not that Nigel, I presume. I want to know what you thought of that, particularly if you've been surprised. I don't want to sound dismissive, but sometimes when we do immediate reaction to political moments, it is much more fun for all of us if we're talking about people, talking to people who have been a little bit surprised by their response to something like a speech, like a manifesto launch. So if you heard something you didn't expect to hear, or perhaps more interestingly, given that the closer you get to polling day, the more it becomes a battle between the two characters leading the two parties in many constituencies. You'll find plenty of people who don't know the name of their candidate but are voting for the leader of a party. Well, yeah, Liberal Democrats, SNP and the rest of them included. But I would like to know what you thought of that speech and then perhaps to a slightly lesser extent what you thought of that manifesto, or what you heard of it at least. 17 minutes after 12 is the time. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. The more of you waiting to share your thoughts on Keir Starmer's manifesto launch, the more likely it is after these words that I won't inflict my impressions upon you. So it is entirely in your hands.
James O'Brien on LBC.
19 minutes after 12 is the time. Seema is in Crouch End. I was planning to turn the radio off as soon as he started, she writes, but I continue to listen and I'm still here. So it was a surprisingly good listen. Ozzy liked the abrupt yes or no immediate answers to questions where applicable prior to fleshing out his answers. I feel that worked well. I mean, so far, Alexandra in Crystal Palace, quite rightly furious that Keir Starmer has scuppered this week's mystery hour, adding, there's no way I can vote Labour now. Finally, some truly important and pertinent political analysis. But Alexandra's tongue-in-cheek response notwithstanding, uniformly positive so far. Hopefully that'll change, or maybe that will change when we start taking some calls, which we'll do now. Veronica's in Sutton. Veronica, what do you think? What did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, before we get into about what Keir Starmer said, what I was just saying to your producer, what I really liked is how it was framed. You were probably watching it from the studio as well, how they had the whole shadow front bench come up. They were sitting there, United team, front and centre.
Yes. Angela
Rayner did an excellent intro and framed everything. Then you had, business community being represented by the chap from Iceland, which, that's probably the only slightly dodgy one because, why was he there? But anyway, then obviously the people coming to talk about the NHS and that awful testimony from the chap there. And
Nathaniel, the music teacher. Yeah. I didn't hear that. So actually, could you tell us what he said? Because I was still talking.
Because he was speaking before about how, he was misdiagnosed and waiting lists and the impact of waiting lists. And then there was another chap talking about the impact of housing as well, which are the two key tenets of the manifesto.
Health and housing.
And I think by giving real-world testimonies rather than having a politician talk about it was very, very powerful. And then Keir came up to talk about it. And I think, some of it did drone on a bit, but I think the Q&A was very snappy. I mean, you had to sort of okay, Veronica, focus, listen to what you're saying. But then I think the Q&A was very good, very snappy, and I think he put to bed some of the demons out there. Yes. I've had the only negative, I would say, and not a negative per se, but I was at your London event and I actually asked you a question about Brexit, if you remember, and is that I've had a quick read of the manifesto, and in the manifesto on Europe, he's explicitly said, and I don't know if he needs to be that explicit, he explicitly said, we will not go. There'll be no return to
single market customs union or freedom of movement of labour. Yeah.
And I'm like, the bridges are there. It's settled, on security and defence, and and sort of maybe on some.
And there's another line. I don't know if you've got there yet on page 100 and something about making Brexit work.
Yeah,
which is slightly. I mean, we're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, I suppose. A bit.
So I mean, overall. We only can. We have hope, don't we? We've got to go forward with this.
Well, it's the hope that gets you, Veronica. We can deal with the despair.
But anyway,
no, thank you. That's a perfect start. Actually, you could have been in the room. Actually, and Natasha Clark, of course, was in the room. We'll be catching up with her shortly. I'm just looking for a negative, and I'm not taking applicants for Idiot's Corner. So, if you're going to repeat some line that you've read on well, to be fair, that's not even happening. I was pleased to hear that the first task won't be redecorating number 10 with ludicrously expensive wallpaper, says Carl. Yeah, so apart from that little Brexit quibble, I haven't got yet a negative response. And remember that this isn't a silo. This programme, indeed, the first hour was dedicated to people who voted Conservative in 2017 and 2019. So that is quite interesting. It's the first time I've heard him sound passionate, says Adrian, who's in Spain. Let's hope he keeps it up. And this was an interesting one. Hi, James. I fell for the Brexit lies and voted for Boris. It was the COVID debacle that started to open my eyes. And when Truss was in office, I thought I could never vote Tory again in the near future. I had literally no idea who to vote for, but that speech from Keir Starmer has made my mind up. You see, it could go either way now. This is what I love about reading text live. That speech from Keir Starmer has made my mind up. It was clear, strong, and sounded like a world leader. He answered every question, and there were no flaky responses at all. Natasha Clark, who, of course, is your tribune in rooms like that, she represents the listeners to LBC, which made it, to my mind, if not to hers, all the more offensive that Rishi Sunak elected not to let her ask a question earlier this week. Certainly managed to ask one today. But first, she joins me now from Manchester to compare the two rooms, Natasha. I jokingly suggested that Rishi Sunak's launch looked like it had taken place in a hospitality suite at Silverstone Racecourse. But then I received a text from someone who does work in sales and said it is a hospitality suite at Silverstone Racecourse because he went to a sales conference there not long ago. Starmer's looked more, I suppose the word I'd reach for would be more like a rally, I think.
Good afternoon, James. Yes, we're here at the Co-op's headquarters in Manchester. And honestly, people literally hanging off the rafters to hear from Keir Starmer this afternoon. It's a multi-tiered building with several floors, and they're all literally been lining the stairs, lining the halls, trying to get a glimpse of him and trying to get in here now for selfies, pictures, and to try and get a glimpse of the man himself. So yes, the atmosphere between those two launches that I've been at this week could not be more stark. And obviously we talked about the energy in the room of the Tory launch, and there wasn't much of it, it's fair to say. Could not be further from what we are like here today. It's like night and day. There is excitement, electricity, genuinely people are beaming from ear to ear. Shadow Cabinet, you saw them coming on the stage just before Keir Starmer came on to speak to us just a few minutes ago, and they're all beaming from ear to ear. They clearly are quite happy. As I asked Keir Starmer how the campaign's going so far, he said, yes, we are enjoying it. And you can see from their faces, obviously, they're riding so high in the polls, the Labour Party, and seemingly that Ming vase, the careful vase that they're trying to carry across to the electorate, is seemingly untouched so far. And yes, earlier today, he's been outlining his manifesto. I've got a copy of it right here. It's got so many pictures of Keir Starmer's face in it. There's 30 I've counted, but not a lot of new policies. And like I said, he stood up today and said that he wasn't going to be announcing anything new. He said what the country wants is stability instead. So it's really a bit of a repetition of Keir Starmer's greatest hits, if you will. Labour's first steps for change. I was there when he outlined those just a few weeks ago, and that really was a dress rehearsal for this manifesto launch today here in Manchester. Cutting waiting lists, that border command to stop small boats, more teachers, Great British Energy, antisocial behaviour, clamp down. And his main focus that he wants you, the listener, to take away from it today is that he wants to be the Prime Minister that's going to create economic growth. Obviously, we saw those figures yesterday. GDP absolutely on the floor, 0% growth in the last quarter, according to those latest figures. Keir Starmer said today he would make it the central mission of his Labour government.
The way we create wealth in this country is broken. It leaves far too many people feeling insecure. People who are working hard and doing the right thing. So we will reform it. And we will keep on reforming it until it delivers for them. Wealth creation is our number one priority. Growth is our core business. The only route to improving the prosperity of our country and the living standards of working people. And that's why we made it our first national mission in government.
But James, there was a dose of reality tinged in his speech today. He admitted that it wasn't going to be easy to do all the things that he wanted to do, that he wouldn't be able to fix everything overnight, and he couldn't just wave a magic wand to make all of the problems that Britain is facing just go away.
Don't get me wrong, these challenges don't disappear overnight if Labour wins. We don't have a magic wand. But what we do have, what this manifesto represents, is a credible long-term plan, a plan built on stable foundations with clear first steps. Tough spending rules that will keep taxes and inflation low. NHS waiting times cut with 40,000 extra appointments every week. A border security command to smash the criminal smuggling gangs. Great British Energy to cut bills in your home for good. More police in your town. Cracking down on antisocial behaviour, and 6,500 new teachers in your school, giving your children the start in life that they deserve.
And in terms of the numbers buried at the bank of this quite chunky manifesto, there are £7 billion worth of revenue raisers in there. Some will call them tax rises as well. But Keir Starmer today promising he won't raise income tax, national insurance, VAT, but other things will be changed. But this is all things that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have talked about before. They're going to launch that clampdown on buying foreign property. They're going to launch closing the non-dom tax loopholes. This is all stuff that Keir Starmer feels very confident talking about today because it's not new policy. He's been defending this policy for such a long time. He said it wasn't fair to raise taxes again on working people when they were already so high. But what he didn't say was whether there could be any other tax rises somewhere else in his first budget to pay for it. We did try and ask him in the Q&A what that might look like, but again, he declined to say that. He also, I think, was a little bit unfair on what the price of austerity might be. There was a question from one of my colleagues about how you're going to possibly stop a return to austerity, but at the same time, you won't tell us exactly where the money is going to come from to stem some of those tax rises, those cuts that the Tories have already stemmed into their thinking.
Well, I mean, the question that is not going to be answered between now and election day is what if the growth doesn't happen? Because the reply will be, and has been, it will. So exactly. That's an exercise in finger crossing.
It is a bit, and I do think that, the Labour Party now in the next 3 weeks of this campaign, if the polls continue to do so, they are going to be scrutinised far more than they ever have before. And I think Keir Starmer's policy of growth, there's not a lot of detail about exactly how he is going to grow the size of the pie to make it all better. Every government wants to get good growth. Every government wants to increase our GDP, but the steps in order to make it happen aren't quite clear. And I think Keir Starmer does risk finding a lot of anger with the electorate if he goes in trying to promise the earth and then comes out and is not able to do so. We don't have a lot of details about exactly how he would do a lot of things. A lot of really emotional, powerful performances today. We heard from Daniel, whose two kids are having to share a bed in East London. From that really effective campaigner Nathaniel, who's sadly dying of cancer, saying he lives in hope that things can get better for the NHS. A lot of why things don't work in this country at the moment. But I just feel that from being here, there are a lot of holes in what Keir Starmer's plan is going to be, and not a lot of answers about exactly what he's going to do to fix them.
The response I'm getting is almost unanimously positive to the speech, but I suppose that we're looking as much at tone and style as we are at content and detail. That there may well be different responses the more the detail settles. But I suppose we should point out that Rishi Sunak is unlikely to answer any of those questions in any more substantive fashion about how growth is going to be generated. Everyone wants growth. But neither of them capable of really setting out a blueprint, if you like, a copper-bottomed blueprint on how growth will occur. But I mean, would it be inappropriate of me to ask you to give marks out of 10 to Sunak on Tuesday and marks out of 10 to Starmer today, just on overall performance, overall delivery, overall reception?
Look, I mean, the overall delivery and reception from Keir Starmer was much better than Rishi Sunak, purely for the fact that he is obviously, doing so much better in this campaign. He's not had the same mess-ups that Rishi Sunak has had. He's not had the same slips. He's not had that D-Day gaffe. And you could see it in his face for Rishi Sunak. He had obviously had a really, really dire week and was trying hard to get back on the front foot. But Conservative MPs are not buying it. Tory candidates are not buying it. And let's be honest, there's nothing moving in the polls. The voters aren't buying it either. Keir Starmer is riding high. He's looking confident. He was hugging people in the audience, shaking hands, doing selfies. He very much looked like a man that was in charge of what was happening today. And he seemed pretty happy and comfortable with the way things have gone. And like I say, they had this dress rehearsal for their for their Labour manifesto launch just a few weeks ago. And it really was a carbon copy of what they did just a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, he's done very, very well today. I think he's come across as very calm, very confident. And like you said in my response to the question, he clearly is enjoying this campaign. He clearly feels very comfortable and thinks that everything generally is going pretty well.
Finally, Natasha, did you get an apology from the Tories for being ignored, having travelled all the way to Silverstone to cover that manifesto launch?
No, I didn't. And like I say, all hats off to Keir Starmer for taking so many more questions from journalists. We always very much appreciate it. There is a bit of a rota system that goes on in terms of these questions. Sometimes you get one and sometimes you don't. But these are the big events and we are incredibly grateful to be heard by the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, today.
You're more sanguine about it than I am. Prime Minister going first to a television station with practically no viewers, funded by a man whose Twitter feed was recently revealed by Lewis Goodall and the newsagents to be absolutely riddled with the vilest sort of Islamophobic rhetoric. That was Rishi Sunak's decision, of course. Although Starmer took a question from the same station, he didn't prioritise it over everybody else in the room and exclude Natasha Clark, who, of course, has the great pleasure of working on a radio station that boasts the most popular talk show in the whole of commercial radio in the United Kingdom, although the name of the presenter eludes me for the moment. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I suppose James in Kidderminster should probably share his views on what that speech was like. Disappointed by the Brexit stuff, but I think it's inevitable. But there is one thing in it that, in the manifesto, we didn't really come up in particular detail during the speech that I think is deeply significant. I mean, it did come up during the speech, actually. Forgive me, because the point is it's free. Financially, it has no cost, but I think politically and nationally, patriotically, this is really important. I'll read it to you. Labour will restore confidence in government and ensure ministers are held to the highest standards. We will establish a new independent ethics and integrity commission with its own independent chair to ensure probity in government. You'll remember that Boris Johnson got through independent ethics advisors faster than most of us get through toilet paper. And in fact ended up without one for much of his premiership. The response to that from Keir Starmer seems to me to be very pertinent. Labour will review and update post-government employment rules to end flagrant abuses seen under the Conservatives. This includes enforcing restrictions on ministers lobbying for the companies they used to regulate with meaningful sanctions for breaching the rules. There'll be quite a few Tories eyeing their post-parliamentary future, who will now be quite worried about that. We will give the independent advisor on ministerial interests the powers to start investigations into misconduct and ensure they have access to the evidence they need. I don't know what the sanction would be, though, if you'd already left Parliament. But that just, some of the stuff that perhaps won't garner the headlines, but is, to me at least, quite important. Deeps is in Finchley to share his responses to that. What did you think, Deeps?
Hi, James. Deeps here. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. I thought he was very honest as a politician can be. And I thought, he was very blunt about raising taxes. I think if you cut taxes, you have to pay for it. And he has no apologies about having to raise tax to make sure that everything that he's put in there has been funded. Although...
he said he wasn't going to raise tax, but he didn't promise to cut it. It's the other way around.
Sorry.
That's right.
But if you look at what the Tories are doing, they're very much cutting taxes, but they're not saying where that money's coming from.
No, well, they're cutting national insurance. The overall tax burden is actually still going up, but they keep saying they're cutting taxes. They are cutting national insurance. And Starmer tried to make political capital out of that in the last few PMQs by insisting that they answer where the money is coming from, and they didn't. But I don't think it worked brilliantly as a political gambit, just because it didn't land with the public in the way that he was hoping it was. And he might have a similar problem a year from now. It's all very well saying we don't need to raise taxes because we will create growth, we will stimulate growth. But of course, if they don't stimulate growth, then the question of where they're going to get the money from becomes pretty urgent. Were you surprised by your response?
No, I think it's really important that you're the problem with politics is the honest politician never gets into power.
Seems that way sometimes.
He was as honest as he could be, and I genuinely think if he does have to raise taxes after being in there for a year, then he will do so, and that's absolutely fine because he's going to give us a plan.
He'll say so, and he'll show you where it's being spent. Any negatives? Yeah. Anything you didn't like?
I am a bit tired of hearing that his dad was a toolmaker and his mum was a nurse, because that's becoming a little bit of a meme in my head at the moment.
Well, it's like Sadiq Khan's dad driving a bus, isn't it? I quite like that, actually. I think that particularly given the conversations we've been having this week about privilege and advantage, when he'd maybe not necessarily hitting the toolmaker line every 10 minutes, but talking about not being able to afford to replace the carpets, that is going to resonate with a hell of a lot more families than talking about being denied the delights of Sky TV, isn't it?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I was in a very fortunate position that my parents could send me to boarding school as a private school. But if you're going to put VAT on something, that's probably a good one to do, because those who can afford to send their children to private school could probably afford to pay the VAT as well.
And those that can't could just give up their Netflix subscriptions and stop having avocado on toast for breakfast every morning. Is Deep short for Deepak?
Yes, it is, yes.
Well, here's a funny thing. I've got another Deepak waiting to talk to me. Honestly, it's like you're like bloody bosses, you lot. I wait ages for one Deepak to come on the programme, and then suddenly I get two at the same time. Thank you, Deeps. Deepak is in Langley. Deepak, what would you like to say?
Regarding this issue, what Keir Starmer keeps talking about, these extra 40,000 appointments that he's, offering in his manifesto. So on the talk show last week, there was a doctor. What he fails to explain is that he's asking current staff to do extra overtime. Now, the NHS staff are already pushed to the limit. The standards have dropped. Now they're asking the current staff to do the extra hours in the evening, the extra hours on the weekends. Also, taking account with the overtime comes the added tax. He's not explained how he's going to.
Are you in the NHS?
I'm not.
You're
I'm
not. Okay.
No, fully not.
I was just wondering. It was not a gotcha question or anything like that.
No. And the other hand is he's not saying anything about recruitment. Even if he was recruiting for people abroad, is it financially viable for them to come abroad now? Because the trust charge them, obviously, what they do. The cost of living has gone back up in England over the last few years, and I think it will still go up. And secondly, what are the incentives? Because a lot of people come from abroad to work as nurses, doctors, and so on. The idea is to save money and send money back home. But that's not going to be the case, because they can't save anything because everything's too much. But he keeps going on about in the last.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer to this problem would be to come to a pay settlement, particularly with junior doctors, and improve the working conditions as well, because you need morale and you need money to solve the problems you describe. And then we're back to this problem, aren't we, of if you're going to bet the house on growth and then growth doesn't happen, where the hell are you going to get the money from?
Exactly.
To do any of this.
And you're looking at close enough to 5,700 appointments a day. It's
waiting list up today as well. I mean, I'm glad that we're picking some holes in what we've heard from Keir Starmer, but if you were Rishi Sunak this week, you've had growth flatline in April, and you've had the waiting list go up again today for the first time in months. So, Starmer might have problems, but they're nothing like what Sunak's are at the minute.
True, but then he also keeps talking about the last 14 years. What people should also realise is that they lost their time when they were in government to the Conservatives, and they've had to pick up their issues ever since. And the problem is, if Keir Starmer gets in...
Well, in 2010, mate, the patient satisfaction with the NHS was the highest it had ever been, and it's now the lowest. So I think Labour are allowed, at least on the NHS, which is the point of your call, at least on the NHS, they are allowed to appeal to their record and compare it to what has happened subsequently. What did you think of the speech? What did you think of the reception or the tone as opposed to the detail?
It was okay, but until you start putting these facts into place and see movement, then it's all hearsay. Every politician is good at saying what they want. Is delivering it's all about delivering now.
So you need to go back.
An overnight fix.
No, of course it's not. But it's only February 2016 when that target about getting patients to start treatment within 18 weeks was last achieved. So you've got a slow decline from 2010 to now, with 2016 being the point when they were still getting 92% of patients to start their treatment within 18 weeks. So it's not necessarily an unclimbable mountain, but you're right to point out that without some sort of change to both the financial remuneration and the morale levels of NHS professionals who will be required to deliver on these promises, then the likelihood of the promises being delivered diminishes. It's 12:46. Thank you, Deepak.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:49. Sheila on the way at 1, of course. I think, did we just play out the wrong bit? Did we just say Sheila was coming up at 10? I think they may have. I'm getting a few comments on it, so either you imagined it or I've misunderstood what all these comments are. But it's definitely 10 to 1, not 10 to 10, in case there's any. Well, it might be 10 to 10 somewhere in the world, but here in the United Kingdom, it's 12:50, and Sheila Fogarty will be with you at 12:59 or thereabouts. Before that, a few more calls on Keir Starmer. Tony in Bishop Stortford's been in touch. Say, James, what's going on? You started today's show feeling sorry for the Prime Minister, and you're reading loads of WhatsApp messages today. Who are you, and what have you done with the real James? I often read out WhatsApp. I've done a bit more than usual today, actually. I don't know why. It's just set the scene, I think, was probably the answer to that question. And I didn't feel sorry for the Prime Minister. I knew this would happen. I said I was in danger of beginning to feel sorry for him. A very different thing. Chris is in the Lake District. Chris, what would you like to say?
Afternoon, James.
Hello.
Pleasure to speak to you once again.
Likewise.
Starmer is, you can clearly see the improvement in him in his speaking and that. So, there's a lot to be excited for as he becomes our statesman, so to speak, on the world stage. But my concerns with the manifesto and the election and what it's been for the last however many months is because of the polls being so high for Labour, is this safety approach, not wanting to offer anything too bold of a vision. Now, there's a lot in that manifesto, that it would be a welcome change, actually, a couple of years of steadiness and maybe a bit boring after the ridiculous years we've had previously under this shambles.
Are you approaching this from the left of Keir Starmer?
No, I wouldn't say to the left, but yeah, probably more to the left than the position of the party he's in. I mean, I am a Labour member.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think in some ways it answers your quibble, because he has worked very hard, arguably too hard, to woo people to the right of the Labour Party, or to the right of where the Labour Party sits historically. And all of the criticism I'm getting, and there's not a lot of it, but the 3 or 4 messages that have come in having a swing at him have come from the left of...
I mean, I'm not having a swing from in the left.
I know you're not. I'm just saying.
The growth, James.
Yes.
We haven't had this growth. He's had to backtrack on maybe raising taxes, or we've had to continue some lighter cuts.
Yes.
And if the people don't feel like their lives have changed in 5 years, my massive fear, and I imagine it'd be your fear as well, is we open the door to that lunatic in Clacton stand. Then, and if he becomes an MP,
I think I've got to read out all the candidates in Clacton now. You've just flipping.
Sorry.
If you go to lbc.co.uk/politics/candidates or lbc.co.uk/candidates, you can see a full list of all of the candidates standing in Clacton. Carry on, Chris.
Don't ban me from ever coming on because of making you do work, James.
I don't know what you're suggesting, but you're right.
We've got to people. I know we don't need dramatic change, but people's lives do have to feel better. And the big thing about the EU part or Europe in the manifesto, why did it have to be so specific about customs union, single market? Why can't it have just been a little bit more vague? Because the biggest growth we could get right now is if we join the customs union. I think independence, so it's like 4% potentially growth. There's a big open. Now I know why they don't want to open that debate. We've got they're building this coalition of voters, and there's the risk that in these northern seats, if we reopen the wounds to 5. The election of 2019, which was a disaster, and I stood in that election and I suffered that disaster firsthand on the doorsteps, and I get it. But
fair enough.
Not many people read the manifestos anyway. Us political nerds.
Yeah, it'd be the front page of the Daily Mail tomorrow if there'd been and they're still worrying about that.
And it will be if we do something that's not. So that's why I mean about being specific in a manifesto, maybe being a bit more vague on Europe and stuff could have mean that there wouldn't be them big headlines. Oh, U-turning and all this.
We will have to. He didn't need to explicitly state we won't do X, Y, and Z. He could have not mentioned it at all, and then left in the line about making Brexit work or undoing some of the damage done by David Frost and Boris Johnson's absolute botch job. Not just my opinion, of course. David Frost was disowning the negotiation he conducted and received a peerage for before the ink on Boris Johnson's signature was even dry. But yeah, I mean, I hear you. That is the central criticism, that combination of an inability to describe precisely where the money is going to come from for any expenditure, if not from tax rises, which have been ruled out, of course, then growth becomes this sort of almost mythical phenomenon that is going to deliver great rewards to everybody. And if the growth doesn't happen, then where does that leave everybody else? And Brexit. And the sense that now everybody recognises, except the most deluded people on your Auntie Doris's Facebook page, everybody recognises that Brexit's been an unmitigated disaster. You've still got a few losers who think there is a good Brexit, but it goes to a different school, clinging to the carcass of their own catastrophic conduct. But, how seriously you're going to take them, I don't know. I suppose Farage is a bit of a mystery figure on Brexit, isn't it? Its entire reputation, such as it is supposed to be built upon taking the UK out of the European Union or being a large part of that process, and of course it's gone incredibly badly, as everybody who paid attention or understood the issues knew it would, and yet he keeps sort of popping back up again like a thing that keeps popping back up again. Thank you, Chris. Julia's in Kingston. Julia, what would you like to say?
Hi, so I'm a Labour voter, but recently been thinking, okay, maybe I'm going to go with the Greens.
Okay, that's interesting.
And that was I found, to me, the Greens are the only people that have actually, to this point, up until I heard Keir Starmer speaking today, really been talking about the need to rein in big business and the lack of taxation and the lack of the Wild West that has gone on in this country for the last 14 years, to my mind, needs to stop. And what I haven't heard from Labour is enough. I get that they're going to tax private schools. I get they're going to tax, get to grips with the non-dom status. But I haven't heard enough about what they're going to do about stopping loopholes for massive, enormous industries at all. So today he answered a few questions, and I felt maybe that, first of all, every question he answered, I felt like he knew the answer to. When I watched the ITV debate with my 10-year-old daughter, even my 10-year-old daughter was a little bit baffled as to whether he knew what was going on. It was a bit like watching... Sorry.
Didn't have a great night, did he? He was much better on Sky last night, I'm told. But certainly he dropped the ball on the Tory fibs about the tax burden. He didn't come back with that letter.
He looked completely flabbergasted at the question, and it took him so long to recover himself.
So he's nudged your needle. He's nudged your needle back towards the Labour Party, has he?
It definitely, because I felt like he was answering the questions, knew the answers, and it's given me a bit more confidence in voting for Labour.
Well, I mean, he'll be pleased to hear that. 12:58 is very nearly the time. I can squeeze in a 40-second contribution from Max in Colindale before handing over to Sheila. What's it going to be, Max?
Well, I'll be as quick as I can then. Basically, I think that Keir has done really well. I'm a Labour man through and through. I didn't think he was very charismatic when he first came into the position. But I think he's timed it beautifully in the end in terms of what he has to do. And what he has...
Stretching his legs and showing his class, Max.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, what he's showing is at the end of the day, we've had years and years of grandstanding and saying, this we can do. Boris Johnson started all that, and then Liz Truss, it's just going to happen. And you say about the fact that, we don't get growth. Well, he just has to give everyone a dose of reality. But he can't be any more positive than the fact that this is going to happen.
So he's doing it.
Such a negative game. He's
inheriting a fairly busted flush. So busted flush. So that expectation management, coupled with not scaring the horses or carrying the Ming vase across an ice rink, if you accept all of those as requirements, as prerequisites, then you end up where Max is, with a very positive view of how he's managing to keep all of those different plates spinning. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store, or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick with you at 4, but now, of course, on LBC, it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.